Okay, we're going to go ahead and start our meeting of the Committee of the Whole. Just a few housekeeping items. The items on tonight's agenda, except for agenda item H, have all been proposed by an alderperson. The purpose of the committee meeting of the whole is to allow the public and other alderpersons. No, we're. Yeah, okay, we'll go ahead. I'm sorry, roll call, please.
Alderman Hayes. Alderman Bolton.
She's in the back.
She's right here. He's coming.
Alderman Guzman.
Present.
Alderman Martinez.
Present.
Alderman Felix. Alderman Newsome.
Present.
Alderman Turner.
Present.
Alderman Donnerworth.
Present.
Alderman Florian.
Present.
Mayor Taylor.
Present.
You have a quorum, ma'am.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Again, the purpose of the evening's Committee of the Whole is to allow the public and alderpersons to have input and comments on these proposals. This committee will take no final action tonight. Some items will proceed further to the City Council action and others might not. Audience time is limited to no more than 40 minutes, and the speaker must speak about items that are on the evening's agenda only. There is no alderman time at this meeting because it is a committee meeting and it's open discussion. So we'll move right on to, I'm sorry.
We're not doing audience time?
There is no alderman's time for tonight. Oh, there is an audience.
But, okay,
Are we doing Pledge of Allegiance?
No invocation, but there is. Audience time.
Mayor, I'd like to put a motion in to seat Alderman Felix.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see him come in. Okay, who was the first? Alderman Guzman. Second was Alderman Newsome.
yeah, that can be done by voice vote.
Aye.
Aye.
No one else snuck in that I didn't see, right?
That was Alderman Guzman and Alderman Florian?
No, Alderman Newsome. She was there for
Wait.
roll.
Who? Clerk Kelly, which aldermen were not present when you called roll?
Alderman Hayes. Alderman Felix.
Okay, so Victor Felix, that was the motion to seat Alderman Felix, I believe.
Yes.
So, okay, good.
Okay. Audience time, and again, it has to be pertaining to something on the agenda. Is there a sign-up sheet, or they just come up?
Well, you have 3 minutes total, each individual person. David's going to run over and get the little sheet. So if you want to speak, please sign up or wave me down. There's a total of 40 minutes for all audience participation, but you have 3 minutes. Now, Tatiana, I know you're one of them. Who's the first one, David? Oh, Tatiana. Tatiana Amarillo.
Got to be on the agenda.
Yep, I believe I'm going to be
Let me
speaking.
get the timer going. Okay. Start whenever you want, ma'am.
I believe I'm speaking on item C. Hello, Mayor Taylor and council members. My name is Tatiana Amarella. I live on Douglas Avenue in the 6th Ward. Until recently, thanks to 6th Ward Alderman Keith Turner, my family has come to depend on the daily shift summary reports from the police department. As you know, these reports are edited and do not contain personal information. Rather, they contain factual information regarding the events in our community. It is my understanding that as of last week, the shift summary reports are no longer being distributed to the aldermen. This limits their ability to swiftly share information about public safety with us, the residents. This information often is most useful when it is current, less so useful when it is weeks old. Information about home invasions, a missing person, carjackings, fights, drag racing, shootings, I could go on, provide the people who live in these neighborhoods a chance to make informed decisions and stay vigilant. Transparency, Your Honor, has been something you have often championed. Providing the city's leaders with time-sensitive information regarding what is happening in their wards, good and bad, falls square within bounds of transparency. Delayed access to this information causes more fear and uncertainty than the information itself. It takes away our right to make informed decisions regarding our personal safety. We have a right as taxpayers to know what crimes are being committed in our neighborhoods, where the police are responding, and if our children can safely play outside. It is not the job of government to pick and choose what we are allowed to know. Rather, it's the government's responsibility to provide all information that relates to its residents in this city. Limiting or delaying access to police summary reports only temporarily masks the reality that crime still takes place. A safe and prosperous community begins with an informed citizenry. People are free to deny the realities that exist here, that's their right, but they also have a right to know the information itself. Please reconsider how your actions may impact the people you represent. We are counting on your transparency and demand to know the realities of what are happening in our wards. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Amarella. Sarah Flores.
Hi, I'm also here to speak on C in regards to the incident reports being published. I have lived on Douglas Avenue now for 2 years. I'm originally from South Florida. And when I tell people that I've recently moved here, the first reaction is never failing. Why would you move here? There's so much crime here. My response is, there's crime everywhere. And then I can actually look up the factual information and show people that the crime is not that indifferent to anywhere else in the country, much less South Florida that was riddled with crime. So I actually take a lot of comfort in those being published and being able to look at the factual information, realizing, okay, there hasn't been anything on our street or even in our ward for X amount of days or weeks or months or whatever. And then to actually break it down and look that we haven't had this many murders or we haven't had this many whatever. It's very easy to look up that information, have it accessible, and be able to come back with a knowledgeable response when people said, but you've moved to this horrible area and you shouldn't go on this street and you shouldn't do this. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Karen Long McLeod.
Good evening. Well, you already know my name. I have lived in Waukegan's 6th Ward for more than 15 years, and I am a member of the Clean Power Lake County Steering Committee. I'm here tonight to urge you to reject item A under new business, the proposed elimination of tree cutting removal permits for residential properties. Tree protection ordinances like Waukegan's minimize erosion and stormwater runoff, provide buffers between neighboring properties, preserve historic streetscapes, and more. These objectives are vital for Waukegan, a community long overburdened by pollution, a community at risk of flooding under high water conditions, a community facing increasing health, safety, and economic challenges due to extreme weather. Consider these environmental and economic facts. Trees improve air quality by directly removing pollutants from the air and reducing building energy use and associated pollutants. In a 2001 study, trees in the 8-county Houston metro area removed 60,000 tons of criteria air pollutants valued at over $295 million. Cooler air temperatures created by tree canopies reduce smog levels by up to 6%. Trees can stimulate economic development, attracting new business and tourism. People walking or driving down a street lined with trees are willing to pay up to 12% more for goods and services. The presence of trees encourages patrons to spend longer time shopping. Homes that are landscaped with trees are worth 4 to 15% more and sell faster than homes without trees. Apartments rent more quickly in properties that have quality landscapes, and tenants stay longer. I know community members have expressed concerns about how and why tree removal permits are approved or rejected, how consistently codes are enforced, and what constitutes appropriate fines for property owners. These are valid concerns, but they can and should be addressed as part of the city's initiative to create a unified development ordinance, which is well underway. To ensure the overall health, safety, and welfare of Waukegan and its residents, we must minimize environmental impacts whenever and however we can. We must protect mature trees and ensure appropriate replacement trees are planted. We must not gut the tree preservation and landscape ordinance. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you, Karen.
Can I make a motion to seat Alderman Hayes?
Yes.
I'll second that.
Who was the first?
Florian, second, Ms. Guzman. Okay. We'll make a quick comment on significant reports, since there was a question about it. So that doesn't particularly pertain to item C, but I guess could be included in that. The reason that significant reports were done was to change the format. We will be going to a police blotter like all other police agencies do. The problem with significant reports is it was never, ever intended to be public information. It was for aldermen to have an update. It was never meant to be public. An alderman determined it was going to be public. They were asked repeatedly and nicely not to do it because initially they were putting names of both victims and perpetrators out. At that point, I considered pulling the significant reports at that point. Some aldermen came to me and said, why should all the aldermen be punished for the bad behavior of one? So I went with that. Then last week, we had a couple of complaints from aldermen and from other police agencies that something was put out about a 2-year-old. These are minors. That should not ever be published. And the fact that it was and information was being leaked to the Lake County scanner, that is not the intent of when significant reports go out. So we will continue to do police blotters, but there will be no specific information given. That was done as a convenience for aldermen. Never has an alderman leaked information that was given to them until now, and that's why that was stopped. You will still get information, aldermen will still get information by phone of significant things in their wards, but it will not be published. And again, that was something that was done, they were told on several occasions not to do it. There can be legal consequences to that. It would be nice if you could speak to an alderman and they would listen and not do it, but that didn't happen. So basically, all the aldermen don't get that information. But like I said, when you have other law enforcement agencies telling you that it's wrong, then we have to listen to that. And from a corporate counsel point of view, it's wrong because it sets the city up for legal lawsuits.
Can I just make a quick comment? No, it's kind of sad that if that information is used in decency, then there's really nothing wrong, because the way I used it is because when I would look at that, I would first of all make sure it's not in my ward. And if it is, I would look if there was a fire, then I would go out and knock on the doors and be able to tell the family, or even there's been a death. So that really, it really helped me to get, I would send condolences car out. So, I'm kind of taken back that we're going to go ahead and pull it. But, if it's used appropriately with decency, then I see nothing wrong with it. But I'm kind of just taken back that we had to go this far, because now how am I supposed to know when there's a death in my ward? How am I supposed to know when there's a fire when I can knock on the door and help them out as much as possible, offer resources that we have in the community? So I'm shocked that we're taking this, but if we have to do this, but I just wanted to put it out there. When I used it for the benefit of my ward entirely. You know, I wasn't grandstanding with it, and I'm not saying no one's grandstanding, but if it's used appropriately, then, you know, it's just sad that we had just pulled it. So I just wanted to let
And that's
people,
what
my
the purpose of it
constituents know.
was initially. It was just for aldermen. It was never, ever meant to be published.
Well,
Corporate Counsel, would you like to say?
Yeah,
Mayor, can
I'm-
I just say we're limiting audience time tonight, and now we're using up the audience time?
Rest assured, I stopped the audience clock, so we still have 33 minutes. May we continue?
I just wanted to clarify, the opinion of Corporation Counsel is that the daily shift reports, which are generated, one for each shift, are informal summaries provided by the shift commander from the police department up to command staff and to the city management. I would say that large amounts of those reports, if FOIA'd, would be redacted for various reasons, for interfering in ongoing investigations, for privacy of victims, in the case that was referred to for the possibility of a HIPAA violation. Whenever the city provides treatment to a victim, whether it be someone who has had a natural occurrence or someone who's been the victim of violence, we are a healthcare provider. We cannot release public information about the treatment of people without being risk of a HIPAA violation. So we have to be very careful on how we put that out. That doesn't mean that the information about the incident cannot be put out. The raw reports that were being placed were never, when the mayor says they were never intended, they were not written in a way that would be FOIA-able. That doesn't mean that crime statistics are not FOIA-able. There are reports that are generated, and the mayor talked about a police blotter. A police blotter is a very standard release of information regarding arrests that have occurred that is specifically provided for under Illinois law on what is allowed to be distributed. And so that's what I wanted to clarify, why the shift reports specifically became an issue. Thank you.
but I was distributing those or putting them out on Facebook for like 4.5 years. And in the beginning, you're absolutely right. The police would include information. They would say a name, an address, types, and how many calibers of shell casings were found, and other information, evidentiary that would maybe impact the investigation. And when I became aware, the police made me aware of that. And so I started editing those. Let me finish, Stuart, please. I started editing those reports to remove that information. So much so, to the point that the police began removing it. So now those reports don't contain an address, they don't contain a name, and they don't contain any evidentiary, potentially sensitive information, right? So yeah, it may be raw, but it's already been scrubbed, if you will. And it was a comment made about that the death of that 2-month-old. Again, no address, no name, just a block. And I'll tell you, it occurred on my block, and I couldn't figure out who it was, right? I didn't know. So, and if somebody figured out, oh, somebody died over on such and such block, and it was Mr. and Mrs. Then what? What information is, I mean, what are they going to do with it? Send flowers? So I think we're overreacting, and again, it's indicative of a lack of communication. The easier thing to have done would have been say, hey, Turner, could you take that off of there? Pick up the phone. You guys call me about anything else, except the mayor, she doesn't call me. But the corporation council, department heads call me. So lack of communication is really this is all about.
I'd just like to say that a couple months ago, there was a suicide in my ward. And I called Alderman Turner and begged him not to post it, begged him. He said, nope, everyone needs to know this. It's transparency. It's going out. I begged him not to put it on there. So he can't sit there and tell me people can't figure it. It had the street, and there's only one house that the coroner's van showed up on that day, right? Like if you're next door to the people and the coroner's van is there, You know which house it is. Who needs to know that your 18-year-old kid committed suicide? Who needs to know that? Whose business is that?
Maybe they want, they didn't
How does that
complain.
affect public
The
safety
family
in
didn't
any
complain.
way?
Maybe they wanted it to be known.
Am I allowed to just ask one question to legal?
We're still in audience time, ma'am. May
Go
I
ahead,
proceed?
Alfie. Go up.
All I have to ask is if there's any consideration by council of the legal ramifications the opposite way. Okay, example, my children bike a certain route. They have biked past a house that is now known as a place that there's drugs and shootings that occur. Because I was made aware of this, I was able to say to my kids, you know what, I'd like you to take a different way to the corner store, okay? So is there any consideration to the legal ramification the other way, where I find out that this is a known perpetrator in our area and that you guys are being quiet about it because of the reasons stated here, and then I'm left with a situation on my hands because of the lack of information? Thank you.
Audi-
So, Mayor, help me understand this. These aldermen are elected officials too, right? And so now you're stopping the police from giving them information. So I want to ask you, corporate counsel, what gives the right for the mayor and her chief of staff to have that information if these aldermen can't? They're not policemen. They do not work for the police department. So there's certain information that they shouldn't see either that violates the HIPAA law and things of that. You may not have seen it, but I've dealt with several situations out here within this community where it involves violence, and your chief of staff have knew about it. Information that he shouldn't have knew because he does not work for the Waukegan Police Department. So when we're talking about limiting this information, she made a very good point. We, the public, have a right to know what's going on. I'm going to give you an applied example because when we talk about Lake County, McHenry County scanner, and we talk about your police department, we decide and we pick and choose which information being released to the public. If it was a shooting over here off by the plaza, I want to know because I may have intentions on going shopping by the plaza. And so if it was a shooting over there, I don't want to be over there. I follow Lake County, McHenry County scanners. I follow everything that goes out, and you guys pick and choose what you let this community know as it relates to our safety. So Alderman Turner, I have not agreed with everything he's posted, but he haven't made that many mistakes where we can pull it like this. We have a right to know what's going on in our community. If you and your staff get that information, we should be able to too. Now, as it relates to addresses and names, I get that. We shouldn't release that. You know what I'm saying? But when names is being released eventually by the public, it's put out there anyways. And if you say information is being leaked to the Lake County and McHenry County scanner, you should talk to your police department. Because per your chief, they have an officer in that office that gives reports directly to Lake County and McHenry County scanner. And I can definitely let your staff know when that was said to me, what day and what time and who I spoke to, because I do have that information wrote down at home. And per the share, that's done with every city. Thank you.
And for the record, I've never talked to anybody or leaked any information to anyone about anything. Never.
What I will say is, we used to get the significant reports. We don't get the significant reports either. That's all done now. The police will do their blotter. The blotter will be made public, just like it's done with the Lake County Sheriff, just like it's done in any other municipality. It just won't be in the same format to the alderman, or myself, or chief of staff, or anyone else.
How frequently?
The police blotter? Is Chief Navarro here? No. Okay.
Because we're talking about weekly reports, it does no good.
We'll release more of that.
Okay,
They're just, we're kind of violating the audience time right now, so we want to make sure that if you have signed up and you're coming up to speak, we need to go ahead and do that, because we have 40 minutes.
That's right, we sure do.
Yep.
So, okay, we pulled this list before everybody had a chance to put their name on it. There's still 31 minutes. Is there anybody who walked in who wanted to talk? Randy? No, I was about this topic. You're good. Any topic. This is the only opportunity you have.
This is, audience time is specifically, audience time is specifically
Has-
limited to items that are
That'll be on the
tonight's
agenda, Randy.
Be germane to the items.
Yeah, no, I'll get it at the next meeting. This is about the police blotter thing.
Anybody else? Last call. You still have another minute, sir, if you wanted to take it. You had a minute.
So when we talk about the city of the business, and you know, this is a good meeting right here. But see, this is where it becomes unfair with us. And this is why I say we should cut some of this alderman time. Because see, us as the people that live in the city, we want to talk too. We want to ask questions and we want somebody to talk back to us. Right now, we feel like we're talking to robots. We call these offices, and a lot of times we don't get the responses that we deserve, that we're looking for. And so I say to all of you aldermen, you know, these is the type of meetings y'all should be having in your wards. We should not have to come here at every council meeting with our grievances if you guys was doing what you're supposed to do. I reiterate again, we don't want to talk about, you know, you giving us 3 minutes only.
That's your time, sir.
Oh, this is so unfair.
Last call for public time. Last call. Last call. Public time is over. Thank you.
On to new business. Okay. Corporate counsel is going to discuss the rules of procedure, and then we'll go on to new business with item A.
We could advance the presentation to slide 3. Thank you so much. Okay, so these are the rules of procedure that were established at the last meeting, the whole meeting.
Actually, you have to hold down the button to keep it going.
These are the rules of procedure that were established at the last committee of the whole on October 19th. This is a committee of the whole of the city council. All members of the city council are members of this committee and will have the right to speak. The mayor serves as the chair, and because this is a committee, the mayor actually can vote. The alder sponsoring the agenda item will be allowed to speak first after their item is called to present their legislative proposal. Corporation Counsel will present the proposed code changes. Staff will provide any comments on the impact of the code changes. The discussion between the alders will be moderated by the chair. Amendments to the proposals are permitted, and here's how the voting will work. There are 3 options. If 5 or more members vote yea, the ordinance or resolution enacting the proposal will appear on the main city council agenda under new business at the first meeting in January. If 6 or more members vote nay, the proposal dies here. It will not be brought forward to the full council. Normally, we do not kill items in committee, because the committees are subsets of the council. Here, everyone is present, everyone can have their say, and therefore, if there is a majority that is against it, then it's presumed that that majority would also carry on at the full council, so this will not be brought forward. Proposals deferred to the next committee of the whole, proposals can be deferred to the next committee of the whole or referred to another committee for further discussion. This meeting has a fixed end time at 9 p.m. When we're approaching that, the committee should discuss if there are items outstanding. We do have a lot of items on the agenda, and there are a lot of items that were left over from the last meeting. If there's still items outstanding, the committee should discuss when they would like to schedule their next committee of the whole meeting. And with that, you can move on to new business. Although I will technically say that 3A probably should have been declared old business because it was held over from the last meeting. And so I will take that as a procedural demerit and reflect it on my record.
One question I'd like to ask, I know at the last time that this was brought up, Alderman Newsom, Alderman Turner, and Alderman Donenworth were supposed to meet with staff on this. Did you ever meet with them? Okay. Okay. Alderman Turner, this is yours, so you want to?
Great, thank you very much. In a nutshell, I think you all recall, this was discussion along these lines was brought about by an extensive fine that was allotted to some neighbors in the 6th Ward and the 7th Ward. Our folk in the 6th Ward had cut 2 trees down that were negatively impacting their property. It was one tree was uplifting the driveway, and the other tree was blocking entry into the house, as well as the roots were impacting the foundation. As part of their extensive renovation of that house, like $40,000-$50,000 or more, they had a contractor on site. He said, hey, these trees are impacting the driveway and the foundation. Owner says, go ahead and cut them. The contractor, because it was such a huge renovation project, he forgot to get the tree permit to remove the trees. And later, when he got the permit for the driveway, planning and zoning did a Google image search or whatever of the property, noticed that there had been 2 trees. They did a calculation of circumference of those trees based on the picture, and they determined that it was basically a $10,000 fine was appropriate. And so they brought that to my attention. We discussed it. I discussed it with several aldermen. We've discussed it here openly. And so my thought is, if it's your tree on your property, if the tree is causing damage. They could see that it was uplifting the driveway. They could see that it was impacting the entry into the door and the foundation. And so my thought is, if you can look at a tree and tell it it's dead, why do you need someone else to come out and tell you that your tree is dead and it's okay to cut it? That's the essence of it. If you can see it, that it's a problem, I don't think you should have to wait for an inspection and a permit and permission to cut the tree. This is not intended to allow people or have people cut down all their trees in one fell swoop. Like, there's going to be some massive clear cutting of trees in Waukegan. It's simply a matter of convenience and getting the problem resolved. That's the nature of it. So, in discussion with this, and we'll see the slides here, we came with a proposed solution or agreement, if you will, ordinance revision, that this would only apply to residential properties, not commercial properties or industrial properties, and there would be an agreement, or it would be written that you should replace those trees with others. We'll see the details shortly. And then a maximum fine of $750. And that's the essence of it. We'll see the other slides now.
Go ahead, Alderman Fleury.
I didn't know if the people who also visited the staff had anything to say first, I guess, before. Okay, maybe not. Okay, so my question is, what problem are we trying to solve here? Are we trying to solve the problem of the fine being excessive? Or are we trying to solve the problem of people of having to get a permit? Are we trying to solve the problem of you can't cut down any tree you want to cut down? I guess I want a little clearer explanation of exactly what problem we're trying to solve.
Right. So the first 2 that you mentioned, the excessive fines, the excessive fines, and the need to get a permit for cutting a tree that's called a problematic tree that's on your property.
Right, but there's the rub, right? Because defining a problematic tree might be different for you than it is for me. And these people would have qualified for a free permit, right? They just forgot to get it. You said that. So they would have got a permit. with, just by asking for it. And they failed to do that, and their contractor failed to do it, and I've said that multiple times up
Not only
here.
did their contractor forget, they are also flippers themselves, so should have known what the.
Right. What the
laws
ordinance
were to
was.
begin with.
Right. So we need to hold the contractor responsible, in my opinion, and this does not do that. This lets the resident off the hook scot-free, and there's nothing in there that doesn't prohibit someone from cutting every tree on their property. I have someone in my ward that bought a house with all these beautiful fruit trees in the backyard. Well, he doesn't like fruit trees apparently, and he's cut down every single one of them. Now, he's behind a 6-foot fence, so we can't do anything because, you can't look over the fence and blah, blah, blah. But by eliminating this permit, you said just a minute ago, it shouldn't allow anyone to cut all their trees down, but it does.
I'm not saying it doesn't allow it, but the purpose, the intent is not for people to go out and do it. If they want, well, then
We can't, I would
easier.
never agree to this. I would never agree to this
So what-
because it's not going to stop Mr. T from coming to Waukegan if he wants to and buying a house on Sheridan Road with beautiful trees and cutting every one of them down.
All right, so what would you propose? How would you
I would
modify
propose
that?
we keep the permit. It's free. It's a free permit. How many times do we have a free permit? Never.
So, Lynn, as property owners, and we pay for this property, and we own the property, why do we have to go get a permission slip to do something to our
Well,
property?
ask Miss Newsom, who's next to you, about the resident in her ward who didn't ask permission to put a pool in their
Yeah, I
backyard.
understand
And
that, but
now
we're
their
not-
neighbor's yard
We're not
floods.
talking about pools, we're talking about trees.
But it's their yard. Shouldn't they have been able to put a pool in it if they wanted to?
In my world, yeah, I would agree. They shouldn't have to get a permit. But that's not what we're talking about. We'll have to stay. We can take it for a vote. I don't want to get into a lot of discussion. I would like to go through the remainder of the slides and have discussion and get to a vote.
Mayor, I have a question, please. So,
Yes.
so once the tree is cut down and so they get the approval, do we have somebody out there say, okay, it looks good, we approve it? Or something that we can like follow up on that? Because it looks like they're getting this permit, but we're not following up on it. So, I have a situation in my ward where, and there's a church and there's a tree that has messed up the foundation of the neighboring home. So you have a residential and then you have a church. But I think, and from my understanding, they got the permit, they cut it, but what they did was they cut halfway. So now you got a tree stump sticking out. You got the neighbor's house it got trees growing in there. How they mess it up. Yeah. So my
Stumps
question
should
is,
be removed.
what's that?
Stumps should be removed.
Yeah, but my question is do we have maybe code enforcement say, okay, you've got the permit, I'll send somebody out there, it looks good, now we're fine? Because this is what that church definitely did. They got the permit, and they were committed to cutting it all down. Well, what happens now is like I said earlier, it's just a tree stump, and now you got the ingrown roots in the neighbor's yard. So I like something done about that
Jesus,
also.
are you here? Can you answer that question for us? Because if it's not cut down completely, it's not cut down.
And the problem with that is then I was told at that point it's a civil matter.
Good evening, council members. I will let our Director of Public Works answer that question.
Can you repeat your question, please?
The question is that I know that usually when they get the permit, and then so we say, yeah, you got the permit, but do we ever have any follow-up, like maybe a code enforcement to go out there and say, okay, we see what you've done and we approve it? Because what I'm seeing now in my particular ward, there's a church that they cut a tree down. They said that they will take care of it, they will flatten it out, but now what happened was that they said they ran out of money, and so now you got to have a tree stump. That tree stump has grown roots into the next door neighbor's house. And so then the next door neighbor house is wanting something done. And then when I brought it to someone's attention, they said, well, now that is a civil matter. I'm simply asking the question, the fact as once it's been approved, do we have somebody go out there and say, okay, we approve of it, or it's done? Because, in this situation, obviously they didn't fulfill their obligations.
In this case, we have someone to go out to approve it, not per se to approve it, but to check to make sure that they're not cutting other things other than what they said they were going to be doing.
there's no, after it's been cut, somebody goes back out there and makes sure it's, you see what I'm saying? In my situation, they didn't fulfill their obligations. They said they're going to cut it completely and there wouldn't be a problem. And so what we have now is a big old tree stump. And again, I was told that at this point it's a civil matter. But I'm just saying that at that point, if it's still under the permit, then and if the neighbor complained and called code enforcement, then code enforcement should go out there and say, okay, yeah, you're right. Let's move forward on this. But my understanding is that they're saying, well, at this point, they did have a permit. Now is a civil matter. Now the neighbor has to go to court on that, and I just don't think that's fair.
Okay, we did speak with Noel and Kelly, the attorney, and I think what is happening with this ordinance is that, sure, the permit is free, but when it comes to a person that has an issue with a tree that is alive, that is impeding on their property, they are not allowed to get a permit because the tree is not dead. And there needs to be some tweaking to this to use your common sense that if this tree is impeding on my property, going under my driveway, causing it problems, and it's not dead, I should still be allowed to get a permit to take that tree down and get somebody to take it down. So that's why I'm not in favor of eliminating the ordinance, but I do think it should be tweaked. And furthermore, a person that wanted to have their tree taken down had to get a third-party person to come out, an arborist, to tell them whether this tree is dead or not. It was not a city staff person. The resident had to pay extra to have that taken care of. And I don't think that is fair, since we are the ones that are supposed to determine. We should have somebody on staff, an arborist on staff, that goes out to the resident's house and let them know, okay, is this tree dead or not? And usually you can tell if the tree is dead. But if it's a problem with my property, if it's causing issues with my property, or, we have some, well, I'll finish that. If it's causing a problem, I think you should be allowed to get a permit to take it down. Now you have some residents that have dead trees in their yard, and they're permitted to keep them. What are we doing about that? That could possibly fall on somebody else's house. We're not mandating them to take those down, and we know that they're dead. They have limbs falling in your neighbor's yard, on their fences, tearing up stuff, but we don't require that they take those down. So I know that this ordinance needs to be tweaked some kind of way, but to your defense, Alderman, there needs to be a limit on the fine, and then there should be some follow-up. If a person takes the tree down and they're supposed to replant it, there should be some staff able to go out and make sure that once they take that tree down, they should be planting another one. And they shouldn't be allowed to take a tree down if they don't take the stump out, because everybody knows when you cut the tree down, the roots are still living. And it takes years for that tree to totally die. So this ordinance needs to be tweaked some kind of way.
Do you think this is the answer?
Not to eliminate and allow free reign. I think there should still be a permit process, but the process needs to be, I don't know if you want to say streamlined or less difficult for the resident to have that tree taken down.
Is this ordinance going to be reviewed in the UDO? Yes, Noel says. Okay.
Before we
So
go
we'll
any
be talking
further-
about this in the spring.
Wait. I'm going to have corporate counsel explain the differences here before we take any more discussion, because I think there's some confusion here.
Yeah, I don't know if it's confusion, but I think it will kind of help focus some of the comments that Alderman Newsom had made, and also maybe help, maybe Alderman Turner can pick out some things as well that we can focus on. If we can go back a few slides to the third slide under Agenda 3, it says Chapter 22, Trees and Shrubbery, Article 3, Landscaping. One more back. Okay. There are two sections in our code in Chapter 22 that deal with when you have to get a tree permit. And a tree permit, as the mayor was saying, well, it's not quite free, it is $1. But you have to obtain a tree permit when you're cutting a tree that is 6-inch DBH, that's diameter of breast height, so basically about yay high, 6 inches in diameter, that's in a tree protection zone. A tree protection zone includes the front and corner side yards of private property, whether commercial or residential. The idea is that we want to have a tree canopy that shades our sidewalks and that shades our streets. If you do not get under Article 3, there are certain penalties. Could you go to the next slide, please? Because I think this is actually the provision that the trees that were in question at the house, that this is where they were fined under. So under Article 4, Tree Preservation and Landscaping, a permit is required to remove any heritage tree. A heritage tree is defined as any tree that is 20 inches diameter breast height or larger. So you can kind of imagine something that is in diameter 20 inches, imagine that with your arms, and then trees that are 10 inches diameter breast height or larger located in front or corner side yards. So once again, we want around the perimeter of properties that you would have, you'd want to preserve larger trees that put shade on the parkways, on the sidewalks, and on the streets. That's the intentions. They're specific. You can only remove a heritage tree, 20 inches diameter breast height, can only be removed if it is dead or dying or diseased. Now this is, Alderman Newsom, this is the issue that you were talking about, that you can have a tree that is dead, and maybe we can all objectively look at that and say it hasn't had a leaf on it in 3 years, it must be dead. But when something is dying, there are various trees that are in decline, both due to things like Dutch elm and emerald ash borer or just age. And so that is something that you usually would want an arborist to say if something is a dying tree. Here are when removal permits can be granted. If it's, as I said, dead, dying, or diseased. If it's consistent with the health of trees and forestry practices. What this means is there are certain trees that we list and arborists consider nuisance trees. If you have any buckthorn on your property, that's a tree. That kind of tree can thrive in our climate. Nobody wants buckthorn. It's an awful tree. And so it's a nuisance tree and can be removed almost under every single code in Illinois. You're allowed to pull it up no matter how big it is. You can also get a permit if it's necessary to allow any reasonable and economic viable use of the property. If you have a tree growing right in the middle of a lot, therefore you could not build it because the setbacks and such, there's no way you could put a building on a piece of property that you own because there's a giant tree right in the middle of it. You can get a tree permit to remove that. And then finally, that if you will add double the number of trees removed or replaced. And so that is our tree replacement requirement. Removal permits can be conditioned on minimizing damage to other trees and vegetation, installation of protective fencing, and if you do not obtain a permit before you remove a tree, and this is where the property owner that Alderman Turner referred to were cited, is that you can be up to a fine of up to $750 per violation. There is no minimum, but it is up to, that's the maximum for each violation. However, each diameter of breast height inch that you remove is a separate violation. So in this case, the very large potential fine, and unfortunately I don't know how much the fine actually was assessed, but when you had, was it 150 per inch? Okay, so when you had a 29 and a 32 inch, that was, yeah, I mean, it was a significant amount of violations, And so it was basically 60 violations, because each inch that was removed was a separate violation. But instead of $750, I think the city engineer is indicating it was $150 per diameter inch was actually assessed. So that was not the maximum fine. And we can move on to the next slide just to talk about what Alderman Turner had proposed.
There is adjudication process, too.
Yes, yeah, I can. So when a citation for this is written, that's written by staff. But the actual decision on what the appropriate fine is happens after administrative adjudication, which is handled by our hearing officer. And the person cited does get an opportunity to come here to plead their case, to explain their case. In this case, after that happened, the hearing officer awarded a penalty, I believe, of about $8,000.
Was it 8,000, or were they supposed to plant trees or something? Do
Usually
remember
you
that
have to
case?
comply, you both have to pay a fine and comply with the tree replacement. So the proposed amendments that Alderman Turner has suggested would be to keep the permit requirement, but exempt all residential properties from these requirements. So if you are a private property owner and own a residence, you would not be required to obtain a permit for removal of a tree regardless of the size or its location on the property. And the proposed amendments are up on the screen. I do apologize that they're as small as they are, but this PDF is also available on the agenda. And so if we can go to the final slide, the final two slides on this, impact of change is the header. So it would allow private residential property owners to cut and remove trees on their property without prior approval of the city, regardless of the size, species, condition, or location on the lot. The city would not impose conditions on tree removal, and owners would still be required to abide by tree replacement requirements. But the city, one thing that staff noted is that it would be hard for the city to track compliance with replacement requirements if no permit is applied for, if you don't know the trees are coming down. Staff noted that the city would lose a tool for monitoring the health of the urban canopy. And then engineering noted that the loss of mature trees could counter engineering department's neighborhood flooding alleviation efforts. That's the extent of my presentation.
So one question, I thought when we talked about this the last time, I thought the alderpersons and residents asked to wait to take action on this until the UDO. Was that what I thought I heard?
Sorry, we're going to talk about this again in the spring. It's all going to be incorporated into the UDO. Does it have to be expounded upon now?
Yeah, that's a good point. Why don't we do this? Why don't we keep the permit, reduce the maximum fine, regardless of width.
Please use your mic.
Regardless of circumference, make the maximum fine $750, and remove the requirement to hire an arborist. How about that?
But I think one of the important components, I think that's workable, but we have to keep it to, we have to make sure that it continues to apply to residences.
Yeah.
Okay, because now it says commercial and industrial.
Right.
I think to Alderman Newsom's point, it sounds like you want it to continue to apply to the residential properties. Yeah.
Okay. A couple of other concerns is, one, that the money that we collect in these goes to a tree fund. And then I would also like, Noel, can you come up and explain about a potential grant that we have? Because that can affect your decision on this, too. I just want you to have all the information.
So our three departments are working together currently to pursue a $3 million grant related to trees. Eliminating requirements for tree control will eliminate us from being eligible for that grant. If we leave this until the UDO, which is being reviewed and supported and informed by these other professional organizations, then we have a chance to get a $3 million grant to inventory and improve our tree canopy in Waukegan. I would encourage you to please leave the ordinance alone. To Alderman Florian's point, there's not going to be a lot of tree cutting in the wintertime, presumably. And if there are permits that come in, they'll get reviewed. We'll work with customers as we always do. And in the meantime, the UDO effort is ongoing. And CMAP has just hired the new consultant that we'll be working with to try to finish it out. So that's exciting for us. And it's moving forward.
So does that include not changing the fee also, like just leave it as it is?
I would recommend not changing the fee, and the reason is twofold. Number one, fines are intended to be a deterrent. As, you know, with any fine for anything, whether it's a speeding ticket or littering or whatever it is, they're intended to be a deterrent. If your fine is so low that it's cheaper just to go ahead and take your chances, then that's what most people are going to choose to do. You have to sort of legislate to the lowest common denominator, which is unfortunate, but it's the reality. The other issue is that there is the opportunity for administrative adjudication. If somebody gets a penalty and they think it's unfair, they can come into this room and speak to the adjudicator, plead their case, and if it's a valid case, the adjudicator that the city of Waukegan uses is a very intelligent, educated person who makes quality decisions, doesn't always rule in favor of the city, makes fair, impartial decisions, and treats people with respect. So I would encourage people, if they don't like a ticket or a fine that they get, they think it's unfair, use the appeal process that's in place. That's why those processes are in place.
Noel, I have a question.
Yes.
How about the arborist part? Is there a part where what you guys are doing with the UDO, would that, if we remove that, would that affect anything that you guys are doing with UDO?
What I would encourage you to do actually is put money into the Public Works Department budget to help fund that, whether it's an on-staff person or contracted services when they're needed.
That might be something that the tree fund could be used for.
Yes,
is to
absolutely.
do consulting.
Actually, I thought that's what, excuse me, I thought that was discussed the last time that this was up, that, what was it, who got fined $8,000, a commercial place, that there was like $8,000 in the fund, and it was going to be used to get one of the Public Works Department person from forestry
I don't
to
know if it'll
receive
be a
an arborist.
staff member because we have a certain number on head count. It might be a consultant that we use, and that could come out of that tree fund that that we put the fine money into. But one of the concerns that I think the director is talking about here is that when we lost our city engineer, people went out and took trees down to put decks up, to put driveways, extending driveways. We have lost so many trees in this city, and then on top of it, we had diseased trees. Then everybody comes and complains when their property floods with these 100-year floods that happen every 2 years. You can't have it both ways. You can't come to the city and say, I'm upset my property flooded, and then you don't have the trees to help with some of that flooding. That's what we put the engineer in place for, was to go back and look at some of these things, because we had no engineering department from 2008 until 2021.
I don't think anybody's actually going out looking at these under the current process. I don't think they go out there and look and say, oh, if you cut that tree down, there's going to be flooding. But and it's an interesting point. Maybe we should do more planting of trees on city property, and like a number of trees are cut down on the parkways every year. A number of them was cut down in the 6th Ward this year. Maybe we ought to make a policy or is how we should be replanting to equivocate those trees that are removed. Does that make sense? If you cut one down in the parkway, put another one up in the parkway or some other city property.
That's part of what our $3 million grant would help fund, is planting public trees.
So while we're doing a lot of discussion about this, and this is really great, this is what I wanted, I but I'm stuck on this fine, right? So even if we're going to modify this under the UDO, I would like to limit the fine, set a maximum fine, $750. The rest of it, we can discuss at UDO time.
Could I make a suggestion?
Absolutely.
Rather than making an edit to the ordinance, how about a moratorium on tree fines until the adoption of the UDO?
Ooh, there's an idea.
How about a moratorium on you're saying keep the 750 in place, but then a moratorium on the diameter-related fine? Because we still need to have some sort of punitive measure in place to make sure we hold people's feet to the fire, right? So it sounds like, I mean, I'm in favor of just waiting altogether, and let's not undercut staff's efforts, and let's not undercut the potential for getting this grant. So that'd be my first recommendation is, I agree, to some extent, I think the fine should be revisited and lowered. It still needs to be punitive enough that people won't do it, but it was excessive, no matter the circumstances before. So I would say leave it alone, but if we can't do that, at least keep the maximum 750 in place, and we can put a moratorium on the diameter-related penalty.
And I will say, I don't believe that we've ever done a maximum fine of $750 per inch. It was, the most we've done is $150 per inch.
Yeah. Now, I'm in a maximum fine of $750, period, not per inch, just whatever, yeah.
That I
Just to
don't-
clarify, would you say that that is a per tree?
Yes.
Okay. So in the case before where, and just to clarify, in the case that you were talking about, there were 61 diameter inches that were removed. The potential maximum fine that could have been applied by the city would have been $45,750. That would have been a lot. I think that the Public Works Department requested a $9,150 fine, which was $150 per diameter inch. And I don't know if that full amount was assessed was approved by the hearing officer.
Do you remember what was approved?
I believe it was reduced.
They just,
All of our fines do get reduced upon hearing to 75 per inch.
75 per inch?
Yes.
Okay, so,
I think they ended up paying like $1,500.
okay.
I think
Yeah,
it's-
we worked with them to ensure they were planting additional trees in their property.
Right,
So
yeah.
that's also part of the process of working with our resident. But it's important to keep the diameter portion to limit cutting out these big, large diameter trees in the city.
It sounds to me like much of the problem was solved at the adjudication point, which is really where it should be resolved. If they took if they went from a $45,000 potential fine down to a $9,000 fine, and then it was reduced to $1,500, I don't think we need to change a thing, because it sounded like the process worked, and it went before the adjudicating officer, who then reduced it down to $1,500. But let's keep some teeth in the ordinance and make sure that people know that, hey, we're serious about this. Now, you can go, you can plead your case, you can present your evidence, do whatever you want to do, but I think it gives the city a little bit of muscle to do what it is we need to be doing as stewards of the city. We sit in these chairs for a brief period of time, and we need to leave this city in a better place than we found it, or certainly not a worse spot than we found it. And one small thing we can do is to preserve our ability to maintain the limited tree canopy we have now and potentially enhance it as we go. So the ordinance itself, I hate to say it, but like the process actually worked. And I don't see a reason to disrupt it. I certainly don't see a reason to disrupt it when it's already being potentially revised by planning and zoning.
It's all came about as a problem for our residents, right? And these are not the only folk. I'm speaking specifically of someone in my ward who brought an issue to me, but there are others. One was in Mike Ward's, and there's others. So again, I'm taking a position of representing the people in my ward, the people in Waukegan, and trying to find a solution, not taking a position of protectionism of the city's authority.
So I see where you're coming from, and I respect that. I think, but like big picture, we have to think about the city as a whole. And I understand that you have a resident in your ward, and Alderman Donnerworth, you had a resident in your ward, but we can't solve for one or two people. We have to be thinking about the city as a whole and the impact that it has on all residents, whether it's negative or positive. So while we all want to represent aggressively the interests of the people in our ward. I think it's the people in the city as a whole that we have to be thinking about first. And it seems like, back to my earlier point, I think that something can be done about the fine, and I would encourage something to be done about the fine when the UDO is drafted. But at this point, it sounds like the ordinance did exactly what it did. The process worked itself out, and that fine doesn't seem altogether that unreasonable given the circumstances. So I would encourage everyone, and I would go as far as to make a motion to not put this on the agenda come January.
Can I just add one quick thing before we get the second to that? Is we did have a company that removed trees on our parkway without ever seeking a permit, removed several trees, and they were fined pretty hard too. They tried to get out of it by not showing up and the whole 9 yards. But we want to be careful, $750 per tree for a company that makes quite a lot of money is nothing.
This wouldn't apply to corporate. This is just for residential.
I still think you've got to be really careful, but
Well, I think we're doing a lot of talking, and I think maybe we should go with a moratorium on the fine and then let it carry over into the UDO. Because I don't think we want to spend a whole lot more time. We got several things on the agenda.
Yeah, of course. I think that we should keep the fines in place, especially since it's unlikely that there's going to be a lot of them doled out in the next couple of months, and then it gets revisited. And I agree, and I can get on board with you, and I'm happy to talk about ways to reduce the fines while still keeping teeth in there. So my proposal would be to keep it the same and then revisit the fine come, I think, April or May.
Make your motion, Tom.
All right. Was the motion clear enough the first time? I guess the motion is to keep the ordinance the same and not put it on the January agenda, but I represent Alderman Turner that I will work with you to discuss the fines.
And I'll second the motion.
roll call, please, Madam Clerk.
That was initiated by Alderman Hayes and seconded by Alderman Turner, is that correct?
Yes.
Alderman Hayes.
Aye.
Alderman Bolton.
Aye.
Alderman Guzman.
Aye.
Alderman Martinez.
Aye.
Alderman Felix.
Aye.
Alderman Newsome.
Aye.
Alderman Turner.
Aye.
Alderman Donaworth.
Aye.
Alderman Florian.
Aye. Thank
Motion-
you, Alderman Turner.
Mayor Taylor. Mayor
Thank you,
Taylor.
Alderman Turner.
Item B, a minimum of off-street parking requirements for commercial uses, and it's a proposed amendment to Article 12 of zoning ordinance, and the sponsor of that is Alderman Felix. Corporate Counsel, would you like to explain this?
Yeah, this is a really technical one. So I'm going to put Alderman Felix on the spot and say, if you could kind of describe what your aim of this was, and then we can talk about kind of what would need to change to make that work.
So the aim was to help either current structures that are there, or or current businesses that have certain lots, to leave them as is. So if a small business wanted to start fixing their parking lot, then we would not require. No, that's a totally different one.
That was last week.
This
This
is
is the one about eliminating the minimum parking requirements
Yes.
for existing commercial businesses.
Yes. Okay. So for a certain place, I don't. If businesses want to have like a certain certain attendance of people going into their businesses, I would want to make sure that we would just leave it to capacity only, instead of having the parking also affect the number of people that can be in a certain place. And this is more for smaller businesses, not commercial. And if we can go through the slides before we go over everything, then we can kind of go through everything, and then everyone would have an opinion of what we're doing.
Yeah, I'm happy to do this now. I am going to ask Noel for some help here, because parking is absolutely one of the most complex things that goes into a zoning ordinance. And so the one procedural note is that any change to our zoning ordinance would need to go to the Planning and Zoning Commission. So if you make a recommendation tonight, it would be a recommendation not to go directly to a city council agenda, but to then send this to the to the Planning and Zoning Commission for review and recommendation. So, Noel, can you talk about how the code regulates parking for commercial uses? And I'm asking you to do a lot, to talk about the different classes, and then what are the regulations with regards to number of spaces, dimensions of spaces, and then also what triggers that when you have an existing property? Because, Alderman Felix, would you agree, you're talking about existing buildings and existing parking lots, not a new development that is being
Correct.
built?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Okay,
No,
so
thank
I
you.
didn't bring my ordinance book with me, so I can't tell you every classifications verbatim, but I can run up and get it if I need to, or pull it up online. Generally speaking, commercial parking uses are based on square footage and the type of use. So different uses fall in different classifications. The vast majority of retail-oriented parking requirements are 3, 4, or 5 parking spaces per 1,000 square feet, depending on the intensity of the use. Things like gathering spaces, auditoriums that have fixed seats, it's 1 parking space per 3 seats of capacity in the space, and that's the fixed seats. There isn't any classification that matches parking to capacity. It's never 1 for 1 in any classification in the zoning ordinance. So it's always assuming that 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 people are going to travel together in a car, or some number of people aren't going to be in a car when they arrive. They're going to walk or bike or use public transportation, and hopefully more and more of that as our systems are improved to keep public transportation and pedestrian and bicycle access safer and more convenient. So most of our classifications are not very intensive already unless it's a massive facility. The casino, for example, massive square footage, massive amount of parking required. They actually wanted more parking than we required. So that's often how it turns out. We did have a public meeting on this in August. I want to say it was August 24th. Where we had somebody from Chicago Metropolitan Agency for Planning come and present on parking. I know some of the aldermen were there for that, and you heard them say that we should reduce some parking requirements, and you heard my staff say that's exactly what we're doing in the UDO. We're eliminating some of the parking requirements as part of the UDO. So, Stu, I jumped over some of your requests for what I said. Parking space size, minimum 9 feet wide by 18 feet long. If it's not parallel parking spaces have to be 22 feet long off the top of my head. I'm sorry, what else did you ask me to?
I think one of the important things that Alderman Felix was, Alderman Felix was concerned with is
When it's
what
triggered.
what triggers,
Yes.
when you have an existing building and an existing parking lot, what triggers compliance with our current parking requirements?
Thank you. Change of use is what triggers the requirement. So if a new business goes into an existing building, we look at that business's use and what the parking requirement is for that use. Again, we're anticipating many of those requirements are going to go away with the UDO, assuming that you adopt it similarly to how we're planning to present it. But right now we look at that, and let's say that your parking space requirement is, just for round numbers, let's say you're required to have 10 spaces and you have 9 on site. We have an administrative process that's the Development Review Board. We'll have you apply to the Development Review Board, which at this point is meeting every month. And the department heads meet and they look at the case and they'll say, okay, that's minor, no big deal. There's a bus route right nearby. There's a public parking lot nearby, fine, approved, variance granted. And we're seeing that we have one this week when we have Development Review Board that's a minor parking variance like that. In the case of a major parking variance, so say, again, 10 spaces are required and they only have 3. That's a significant variance. That would go to the Planning and Zoning Commission as a variance. And go through the regular process and likely get approved, honestly, if it's a case where there is public transportation, bike routes, that kind of thing.
And Noel, we've talked a lot about the pendency of the UDO. What is your department's kind of position on enforcement while the UDO is being considered?
Yeah, so our challenge is, we have applications that are in process for a period of time. We meet with people when they first want to talk about a project, and some people turn around and have their paperwork done the same week. And some people take 3 months to do their paperwork because they're deciding what they want to do, or they're looking for an architect, or whatever the case is. They have family weddings and things that interfere with it, and it's not a high enough priority. So people take different amounts of time to follow through on the process. And that's up to them. They're entitled to whatever time they want or need for that. We're glad to meet the same week to take an application, and we're glad to meet whenever they're ready for that. Once they've submitted an application, it goes through the planning and zoning process, then to the community development committee of council, and then to council, as you're familiar with. So it's not a difficult process. It does take a little bit of time because there are statutory publication requirements for Planning and Zoning Commission that we have to publish in the newspapers and send letters to the property owners within 250 feet of the parcel so that they have knowledge of the application and the ability to object or support, and be aware of the public hearing so that they can come and speak at that time. So it does take a little bit of time, but it's not overly burdensome, and it's faster here than we're hearing it is most places. But with the UDO, we're anticipating that many of the requirements will be either reduced or eliminated for commercial parking, and will depend more on what the business thinks their demand is. And again, hoping that going forward, we're looking at complete streets approach when we're resurfacing streets, that we're looking at what the pedestrian and bicycle amenities are to try to make that more available, that we're requiring people to put in bicycle racks and things like that going forward.
And not to ask a leading question, but is kind of the trend in planning to move away from minimum parking requirements or high minimum parking requirements?
It is.
Do you have, is the UDO in a kind of a draft enough format that, like, what the suggested number is, or if there's, has that been published and circulated, or is that available?
It hasn't been published yet, so CMAP provided us a draft that my staff edited and has given back to CMAP with some changes that we recommended that are more reflective of Waukegan. As I mentioned, CMAP has now hired a new consultant to work with us for the rest of it. So we'll be meeting shortly with that consultant. We'll take another run at it. And when we think it's a little bit more ready for public input, we'll provide it to the aldermen first for feedback, and then we'll have it out in the public. We'll have a series of public meetings. We'll be actively soliciting input on it. And we'll make edits to it before the final version's presented through the process again, through the Planning and Zoning Commission, because it includes the zoning ordinance, the Community Development Committee, and the City Council.
Okay. Thank you, Noel. Just to go through the proposal as we drafted it. So I'm going to ask the person controlling the slides. It is, I'm going to count how many slides we need to go forward from where we are. It is a lot, so I apologize.
I think Alderman Florian had.
While you're doing that, I'll also add that our uses list is changing also, so we have a
13
huge number
slides,
of
please.
uses now. Sorry. Did you get that? Okay. And we're reducing the number of uses. We're making them more general. So instead of saying, let me pick some uses. We have haberdasheries, hand laundry, hardware store, hearing aid store, hobby shop, home furnishings. We'll have things more like, retail goods, that kind of thing. So they'll be broader categories.
So one of the, yeah, sorry, this is a really complex one. I don't mean to monopolize, but one of the things that does make this proposal complicated is the large number of uses and use classes, which, as Noel mentioned, is going to be pared down significantly. But starting with this slide, it goes through various classes of uses and states for which types the parking the parking requirements will be retained, and then where they will be eliminated. And in class 11, you'll have the elimination of the requirements for most uses. And there are a few that would be still required for fire stations, police stations, philanthropic and charitable institutions. The next slide shows all the ones that will be eliminated. Moving on to Class 13 on the next slide. We have a bunch of uses where it'd be preserved for bowling alleys, department stores, drug stores, food, grocery, meat stores, larger uses. The next slide would be Class 13 where it'd be eliminated. Oh no! Oh, we jumped forward a bunch.
Perfect.
Okay. Okay, great. And then, yeah, there's 2 slides of Class 13. These are smaller businesses, including like optician sales, pawn shops, pet shops. The next slide would be classes 16 and 17, which are carry-out, drive-through, family dining, and taverns. We would be eliminating parking space requirements for all of Class 16 and 17 users. The last slide on this presentation, parking requirements for all uses currently undergoing public meeting and hearing process. So the UDO is being considered, the UDO is considering a lot of these things. But what this would do is, in the interim, if adopted, would release the requirement for the vast majority of commercial retail businesses from having specific parking requirements. So,
And if I
sorry
may-
for the very long-winded summary.
If I can add to that, because of the timing issue and it needing to go to planning and zoning, if this were recommended to move forward tonight, it would make the January 1st agenda for the Planning and Zoning Commission, which would be the February Planning and Zoning Commission, the second Thursday of February at 7 o'clock in the evening in this room. Then it would move on to the Community Development Committee the first Monday of March, during which time we'll probably be making presentations on the UDO with any luck. We'll be that far along with the new consultant. And so anybody who is in the process, in the pipeline prior to a city council approval of this will be under current rules. And anybody that falls in between that adoption and the adoption of the UDO will be under these rules. And then from the adoption of the UDO on, it'll be another set of rules, which not only makes it confusing and difficult for our customers, but it makes it confusing and difficult for staff and for future staff to understand why this was happening at this point in time. So I would just add that for everybody's understanding of.
I would like to say that I'm willing to wait. We still have to meet, of course. I know that we were planning a meeting before this, but it's okay. You know, I'm okay to meet. I mean, everything that you guys are talking about in the UDO is, you know, essentially what I'm trying to do. You know, to make it more better, and also, you know, if we're gonna eliminate the classifications and bunch them up a little bit, I think we should do that. So
Awesome, I appreciate that.
I'm okay with what can we.
Are you making a motion
You
then?
can make a motion.
I can make a motion to.
He's
the
going to make
motion.
the motion first.
What would you recommend to hold it off, or?
Yeah, I mean, I think we can kind of do exactly what we just did with the last one, which is to leave the ordinance as is and pending review by the City Council of the UDO and how it addresses the reduced parking expectations for commercial.
Can I just say something before we take the vote? Or I'm sorry, you want to make the motion, go ahead.
Oh, no, go ahead. Go ahead.
So, may I?
Was it?
Thank you.
I didn't finish the motion, so you can go ahead. No.
Yeah. I just want to remind everyone that, you know, these items that we're discussing here came about in response to issues that were brought to our attention by our constituents. In some cases, it's a single individual. In others, it's multiple individuals who have brought the same thing to our attention, and we're being responsive by trying to mitigate these issues, right? But as you were speaking, it occurred to me that crux of the problems that we think we're trying to solve, that we're working to solve, is the bureaucratic morass, the processes, the hindrances to businesses, particularly as they try to do business in and or with the city. The licensing process, the inspection process, the code compliance bill, it's multifaceted, and that's what we're trying to address. And you know, some of you have heard me say in the past, we can't be business friendly if we're not business friendly, and that's what we're trying to do, is smooth some of these hurdles that businesses are having to endure. And so I was listening to you speak, Noel, and again, I think we need a broader discussion focused upon streamlining some of these processes, streamlining some of the permitting, and in some cases eliminating some permits or licenses or whatever. I think that's the broader discussion, and thank you for letting me say that.
But this
And ready for a
administration
vote.
is already doing that. I mean, we've streamlined closing letters, we've streamlined a lot of things, but it takes a while for us to do that because it affects different departments. So we sit down as a team and go through the process of, if we start to change this process, how does that affect everything else? Does software line up with everything that we can get all that information? So because the UDO is a big part of this, that's why we're saying, if you can just give us 5 minutes to get this UDO done, I think it'll answer a lot of questions. But we are working on trying to make the processes better.
May I comment? Alderman Turner, I know you know, and I've extended the offer to all of you, but I extend again. Please, if you have a constituent with an issue, make an appointment with us. Come in with your constituent so you can see firsthand how we handle it, what we tell them. You all know I've been here a very long time. There have been times in the years that I've been here that if somebody found out they had some hurdles to jump through, they would call somebody else and try to get it smoothed over and solved without going through a formal process, a legal process, a required process, a safe process in many cases. If you think about fire and building codes, that's life safety stuff. So we make a concerted effort to do things the right way. We have a customer orientation, all of us, my colleagues, everybody. We love our customers, we love our Waukegan constituents, we want to help people for the benefit of the constituent and for the benefit of the community. Everyone here has dedicated their careers to this town, and we love it here, and we want to see it succeed by individual and as a broader community. So we want to help the customers. We give them all the information they can. If they choose instead to try to circumvent the process, we can't help that. We'll still be here when they come back and try to do it the right way. But if somebody has a problem, come to us with it. We'll be happy to sit down. We'll go on site. I've done that with you. Brought one of my staff people, went on site to your constituent, solved the problem, got them through the process, right? And we're glad to do that on our turf, on their turf, on your turf, wherever you want. We'll try to do that, and you'll see how we work with the customers. We do want to solve the problems, and we do want to lead people down the right path to get a positive outcome. You're
Madam
welcome.
Clerk, I'm sorry, one quick question, then I'm going to call for the roll call. Okay, roll call, please.
Alderman Hayes.
Aye.
Bolton.
Aye.
Guzman.
Aye.
Martinez.
Aye.
Felix.
What was the motion? Was the motion done?
You made it, sir. It was leaving it for,
I didn't make the motion.
You did, and Martinez seconded.
I didn't say anything.
Oh, you didn't complete your motion, sorry, okay.
So, hope to leave it as is, yes. Okay, now we can,
And your vote, sir?
aye.
Newsome.
Aye.
Turner.
Aye.
Donnerworth.
Aye.
Florian.
Aye.
Mayor Taylor.
Aye.
Passes.
Thank you.
Item C. Corporate Counsel, do you want to clarify, or?
Well, if Alderman Turner wants to speak as to the impetus behind this item, and then I can go through the
Right, thank you very much. So this came about as in response to the mayor's declaration that first we shouldn't speak to any city staff, and then we shouldn't speak to the directors. Everything should go through the chief of staff. Then I think it went back to just talk to department heads. Excuse me. And it was very confusing. It didn't make sense to me and several others. And so I had wanted to propose an ordinance that said we could talk to whomever we want, right? And I just think that this is another example of failure to communicate and misunderstanding. So I can speak for myself, and I've also spoken with a number of the other aldermen, not all, but most of the other aldermen. And the bottom line is that when we communicate with city staff, normally it's with a department head or their second, or someone who, and rarely, someone who is customer facing, right? So anybody would call and talk to that person. I'll give you an example. Sometimes I call and I talk to police dispatch. Anybody would call and talk to police dispatch. So if I got a question for dispatch, why would I need to call the chief of police? Why should I call the chief of police? That's but one example. So I think it's important that we have this discussion about who we're communicating with and how we're communicating. I also want to make it clear, absolutely clear, and I'm going to go on a limb and say that, speak for the alderman that I haven't spoken to about this, but I can tell you that I have never, ever, not one time given any employee a directive, an order, a demand, anything. I ask questions. Can you do something? Or I advise there's something that needs to be done. Can you put it on the list? Hey, there's a tree that the limb is hanging over there. Can you look at that? And it's never go do anything right now. I might ask, when can you do it? Right? This was a hot one. You might want to give this priority, but it's never been a directive to anybody. I ask questions, and I think everyone else does too. So, crux of this one, Stu, you can take it away and kind of run through it real quick. I don't know that we need to do an ordinance. I think we just need some clarity in policy, if you will.
So Alderman Turner worked with my colleague Kelly Gandersky and came up with a proposed policy that the City Council can adopt that finds a balance between the fact that we are a mayor-council form of government and that the mayor is charged with managing the city and managing the department heads, and also the fact that having all communications flow through one or 2 points is inefficient, and that the alderman should have the ability to talk to department heads or a designated person. At the same time, Alderman Turner recognized that sometimes employees can feel like they've got not just one boss but 10 bosses, and so that there has to be some line of communication. The actual full text of the proposal was put up on board docs, but this presentation is going to kind of summarize the big hits. So this is the current code. We have 2 sections in the Waukegan Municipal Code that says the mayor manages the city's officers. The mayor may at all times examine and inspect the books, records, and papers of any agent, employee, or officer in the municipality. That comes directly out of the Illinois Municipal Code, which is the law of all municipalities in the state. This under law does not necessarily apply to council members. So this was another issue that the alderman asked to address, was an access to records. And so we tried to address that as well. So here's a quick summary of what this proposed code of conduct would, and this is a code of conduct of how the city council interacts with staff. It would provide guidance for council members when requesting information or services from staff. recognizes that alders receive requests from constituents. It indicates a process for requesting information. First, go to the mayor, the chief of staff, or department heads. It encourages department heads to designate a staff member for council to communicate with in the department head's absence. If a department head is not going to be around, if they're taking personal time, vacation time, if they're at a conference, that there is a specific person within their department that is designated to receive council member inquiries. And then a few other things that it would do. It says that in all instances where council members request information from staff, staff should endeavor to respond timely to the council member requesting information and should not take action or measures that would stifle the council member from receiving information helpful to their respective constituents. An individual member of the council, and this is important, an individual member of the council may not direct the work of staff in any manner or encroach on the mayor's supervisory authority over staff. With regard to requests to review or receive documents or videos that occur in the ordinary course of city business, council members are entitled to review any information that would otherwise be released in a Freedom of Information Act, subject to redactions, unless the mayor, in his or her discretion, deems it appropriate to otherwise authorize the review of such information as part of the official business of the city council, which means that they would have to go through a FOIA, and basically the lawyers would have to make sure that everything was redacted properly before it was released. But the default is that council members would be given access to records unless there's a specific reason to make them go through the FOIA process. I think that, and then finally, communication works both ways. So staff members should timely communicate with their respective director, department head regarding information or requests received from council members. If a council member happens to be, out on site in their ward and they come upon a scene and they talk to somebody, even though they're supposed to go through a department head, if a staff member receives that request, they should tell a department head. So the department head understands where all the requests are coming from, and you're not getting a feeling that staff is reporting to multiple different requesters, basically. This is, I can say that this, we feel, is a balance between the existing authority in the code and what Alderman Turner came with. And if you have any questions, let me know.
Mayor, what do you think?
I'm fine. Here's the thing that I've had issue with is we have gone out of our way to make everything accessible. We do automatic briefings, which we've never had in the past. We've done everything that we can to let the alderman know. I remember when I was an alderman, even our emails used to be screened. I don't do that. I don't believe in that. My concern is there have been issues where you have gone to staff, and you have because there was a complaint. So I have to look for staff and say, go to the director level, go to their boss and ask them. Department heads should be more than able to answer questions. But one of the concerns that always comes up, for instance, if you call Public Works and say, an employee and say, I want you to look at this tree today, Director Garland may have already sent them on another job that he thinks they're doing, and they're taking off for something else. We don't want that happening either, because they have their priority list every day that they go out on. They go out of their way to accommodate aldermen on certain requests for emergencies and everything else. I don't think that's ever been a problem. I remember one time that I've never said things need to be FOIA. The only thing that I've ever said is there was one time that it was asked about an employee's record. We do not give out employee information. I don't even get to see those records. Those are confidential through HR. That's not for aldermen to see. It's not for me to see. That's just following the law. So I have no problem with people talking to department heads. I think it needs to go through the department head, so at least the supervisor knows that this is a request that was made, because then they're the ones that can do the follow-up on it. You know, they're the ones that can say, was this job actually done? When they're gone, then their second in charge is the person you should go to. So,
Yeah, I think this is a lack of communication and jump to conclusion, making assumptions and jumping to a conclusion. So all of what you said is all of what we do already, right? We talk to the department heads where they're second. And the incident where you're talking about, I talked to a city employee other than a department head. That guy was customer facing, right? So he's talking to the public anyway, right? So I didn't go around the chain of command. I went right to the guy that answers the questions to the public. But I don't want to belabor the point. What I do want to do is get through this. And my question to you was, if you're good with what's presented here in this code of conduct, yeah.
I mean, I have no problem with people talking to department heads. That's where it should be. I don't think it should be on a staff level and making staff. You got to remember, staff gets a little intimidated when you guys come around, and they don't necessarily know whether to say no or yes or what. It should be done through their supervisor. It's just respectful to the department head to go through them.
I agree. I totally agree. And I just want to reiterate that I have never given any directive or order to anyone. I don't have that authority. And maybe it's again, communication. Maybe they need to clear that with your down chain command and say, hey, you remember the aldermen are just asking questions. They're not giving you orders.
But there was an issue that came up. Alderman Hayes?
So a couple clarifying points. First, this isn't recommended to be for an ordinance. It's an internal policy. Is that the idea behind it?
This would not be codified as part of the code, but it would be something that is a code of conduct that you would be adopting to bind yourselves. There would not be a penalty associated with violating it, but it is something that you are saying this is how we're going to conduct our business.
Okay. Next question is, it sounds like I've never been told I can't talk to a department head. In fact, that's what I thought policy, if we want to call it, was to, you email a department head, and then from a workflow perspective, they will then pass it down to whomever is responsible for that particular task, or to a different department if it's not their arena. So this just seems like overkill to me. I don't know that I have an objection with anything that's in it. It just seems like if we all understand that if you have a tree that needs to be cut down, or leaves that need to be picked up, or a building permit question, I guess I'll speak for myself. What I do is I send an email to the department head and I copy Chief of Staff Bridges on it. Therefore, the mayor's office knows what the request is. Just in the interest of transparency, everybody kind of knows what the request is. And that works really well from my perspective. So if we're all on board with doing that, I guess I don't understand why we need this. And I say that without having any real objection to this. It just seems unnecessary.
So we can push it forward if it's, maybe it's more of a formal, I guess, way of doing things.
Push this forward. One thing I would push in, because we have had this happen with other mayors, is that you can send an email to an alderman or to a department head without me having to see it, because that has happened where other mayors read all the emails that go from an alderman to a department head. And I personally don't feel like, one, I need to micromanage you. You're adults. You should be able to talk to department heads without that. But if you're that concerned about that, then I think you should add that part to it, that you should be able to issue emails.
Is this going to be something we actually vote on, Stu, or is this, I guess I'm not clear.
The proposal originally from Alderman Turner was to actually amend the Code of Ordinances, specifically the city council provisions. We have advised that your Code of Ordinances has a lot of stuff in it that it doesn't need to get very granular things. So what we had proposed was that this code of conduct be adopted by resolution. There are other things that, like the civility pledge that was going to be adopted by resolution. This is about how you are conducting yourself. Think of it as a standard operating procedure. And
I understand Alderman Hayes saying, he feels like it's overkill, but I feel I hear where the mayor's coming from, because I think I was subjected to some of the same things she's talking about in the past. And it's very easy for things to get political around here sometimes. And this kind of quantifies everything, puts it in writing that if there are some issues that come up, we've got something to fall back on and say, well, this is what we agreed to do if the process isn't being followed. So I think, although it may be overkill, I think it's kind of necessary for us. We're kind of like kindergartners sometimes.
I think I can get on board with it. I'll just make one last comment. It's like, the department head shouldn't take any act or measure that would stifle a council member from receiving information. I think we all just need to be aware of our requests have a tendency to stifle the department head's ability to do their job. You get 9 different requests or 10 different requests from different people with different needs, with different expectations, and it can become very overwhelming, and you can quickly, I would imagine, lose track of what it is you set out to accomplish that day. I mean, we all sit down at work or come into our job with what we hope to accomplish for the day, and we all know how frustrating it is to walk out the door at whatever time that is, feeling like, oh hell, I didn't do one of the things I tried to do today because I had so many interruptions. So it's just purely a comment, but I would just say be respectful of the department heads, as it says in here, which I think is really good, and the fact that what they're trying to do, the big picture of what the department heads are trying to accomplish on a daily basis. So.
And I think, again, Alderman Florian made a good point that things become political. You cannot, as an alderman, tell somebody, well, if I were mayor, I'd keep you here, or I'd let you go, or if you don't help me. There's no room for that with staff. Staff does not get political, and they should not have their jobs jeopardized like that. So, like I said, by all means, I've never stopped anybody from talking to a department head. Now, staff is a little bit different because they have a boss, and that's the department head. And they need to make sure that that department head knows what they've committed to. Whether it be time, whether it be, does this affect the budget, that kind of thing. So out of respect for department heads should be talked to first. And again, that can even be, you can talk to chief of staff and say, this could affect 2 or 3 departments. Do you want to take care of that? Nobody is objecting to that. So, do I have a first to the motion? Alderman
First.
Florian, a second?
Second.
Alderman Felix. Roll call, please, Madam Clerk.
Alderman Hayes.
Aye.
Bolton.
Aye.
Guzman.
Aye.
Martinez.
Aye.
Felix.
Aye.
Newsom.
Aye.
Turner.
Aye.
Donnerworth.
Aye.
Florian.
Aye.
Mayor Taylor.
Aye.
All right.
Agenda item D. Alderman Donnerworth, do you want to talk about this one first?
Basically, I was contacted by the local cab company who happens to be in my ward, and I was talking to the owner of it, and he was having problems keeping staff with the cab company and stuff because they haven't had their fares changed in almost 20 years. So he gave me some information. He sent me on the email. I said, well, send me some information, what you're talking about, and what we can do to help you. Basically, the existing code says there's a flagging fee, so when you're first picked up, it's $2. And then there's a rate 1, and then they have each 1/10 of a mile is 20 cents. And then when You go farther, it can be up to 30 cents. And then for each 60 seconds of waiting time, it's 35 cents. For each additional passenger over the age of 12, but under 65, it's $1. And there's a flat rate for transporting to the following destinations. From here to Midway Airport is $72. From here to O'Hare is $50. From here to Mitchell Field is $72.50. From here to Milwaukee downtown is $82.50. And to downtown Kenosha is $40.
Do we have a number for downtown Chicago?
No, that'll go by rate.
Okay.
Whatever the rate is per mile.
So do they pick you up from O'Hare Airport to Waukegan for $50 also, or they just drop you off for $50?
No, it's $50.
No matter which way?
No matter which way. It's $50 to the airport. Okay, so basically what they want to do to the proposed amendments is they're keeping the flagging fee for the first passenger for $2, and each additional passenger, each additional tenth of a mile is going from 20 cents to 27 cents. And then outside the limits for each tenth of a mile is going from 35 to 40. The additional passenger, if they're between 12 and 65, is still staying at $1. So basically what they are going to do for the airports is Midway Airport's going from $72 to $100. O'Hare Airport is going from $50 to $65. Mitchell Field is staying the same at $72.50. Downtown Milwaukee is going from $82.50 to $90. And downtown Kenosha is staying the same at $40. I mean, he really isn't asking for a lot here. He's not asking for a huge increase, but he says that he's trying to keep people, with money, keep people, be able to pay their bills. And he needs this to, to keep in business. And basically, also with this ordinance, when we pass this, that, they need to recalibrate his vans that they have. And they have 10 vans, and it's $350 a van to have them recalibrated to the new rate, if we pass this.
I have a question for council. Why do we even have an ordinance on this? Because it's a private entity.
This is really a holdover from kind of a prior era. You'll find that a lot of smaller communities still have these. When you're as big a municipality as like the city of Chicago, it makes sense to be able to regulate taxi cabs and the rates, kind of for the benefit of the public. There's another kind of looming question over this, which is that our ordinances do not deal with rideshare at all. So they do not deal with rideshare at all. This is for licensed taxi cabs because when this was written, that was the only type of car that you could hire, basically, aside from a limo. That's not unusual. And so you have kind of an archaic ordinance here that sets very constrained maximum prices for a very specific industry segment that has competition through rideshare, through Uber and Lyft, that are not subject to these limits.
I mean, I don't really feel like we should even be legislating this because, frankly, we don't do this for private business in general, and you're not doing it for all rideshare. So to me, this just seems an ordinance that should be taken off books. And the other part of it is competition will dictate the price. So I don't really feel like we should be dictating the price through our ordinance when frankly the market dictates that, like it does with Uber. So I feel like this ordinance needs to be gone completely anyway, not for us to change the prices, but for them to be able to change their own prices, and we shouldn't even have this ordinance.
The only
do
public,
that?
I gotta
well,
see it.
actually, the only public policy justification that I can make for this is that, there was a time when, before Uber and Lyft, where if you lived in a place where public transportation didn't go and you didn't have a car, you were kind of subject to the mercies of what the cab would charge you. And so it was a way to prevent gouging if you flew into O'Hare at 2 a.m. in a snowstorm. But consumers have different choices now. And to answer your question, yes, you could get rid of this requirement completely. You wouldn't have to get rid of taxi cab licensing, but you could remove the maximum price.
Can I ask a quick question?
Wow.
So Mayor, I agree with you, especially as it relates to the fares to the various airports in downtown areas. The only concern I would have, and this might be a non-issue because I don't think a lot of people are taking taxi cabs up here. However, when you flag a cab, you don't necessarily know the price. If they're going to change the price, if it's maybe one company's $5 for the flagging fee as opposed to $2 and another one's $7, like you don't have a lot of bargaining power once you're already in the car. And maybe they can jack up the price or an additional passenger's $10 or whatever the case may be. I think maybe having a standard price for like local transport might be, the way it's outlined here might be helpful, while eliminating the fares to the airport. I'm totally with you. I don't think that we should regulate it. I don't think we need to legislate it. But from a consumer expectation standpoint, when somebody goes to get into a cab, you've effectively lost your bargaining power to then hop out half a block later and say, oh, I didn't realize that was going to be the price.
I think if we eliminated this, it would make it so that they could then have to go on, like you do in Uber, where you have all that information. The cabs would probably have to disclose that because now there's more competition, that it would make it, the part that I struggle with this is, okay, we raise the fees, but what are we going to do in 2 years, 5 years, because Uber may have gone up. I don't really think this is legislation. We don't legislate any other private entity. So I'm a little concerned about doing this. I mean, I understand the history when only cabs were available. But, in Chicago, I believe Chicago gets a percentage too, right? Don't they get a tax or something? We don't.
Chicago always gets a percentage
Yeah.
of everything.
Yeah.
I don't understand why we don't.
Yeah, we're not involved in any of that. So I'm like, why are we even doing this? They should be able to charge what they want, and, that should be the going rate that makes them competitive to compete with Lyft and Uber.
It's unbelievable. I'm going to write this down, put it in my calendar. I absolutely, totally agree 100% with Mayor Taylor.
So the motion would be to dissolve it?
You are awesome. Thank you, ma'am.
So we would motion to eliminate section 2324, the fares?
Are we repealing?
Well, you would, I think, motion to get rid of the ordinance completely, right?
I'd like to look at it to make sure that if we're licensing and we want to continue to license these businesses, that we don't throw that baby out with the bathwater. But we could prepare an ordinance eliminating the maximum taxi cab fares in their entirety.
Also, when you're doing that, can you look at why are we not getting a piece of it as a taxation?
But if we're going to eliminate it, right, then we wouldn't have any way to monitor it, then we wouldn't get a cut of it anyway. And it's probably so minimal.
And you're
that
not
it's not
doing it
worth
with
trying to
Lyft or
enforce.
Uber because
Can you do it with Lyft or Uber?
it would be awful hard because,
It's only one cab company in Waukegan. I'll make a motion that we eliminate it.
I agree
Second.
with elimination. That's not a problem.
yeah.
But I'm looking
Can-
as a
Can we hold
taxation.
this over to give Stu time to check on that? Okay, is everybody okay?
Well,
with-
what I can commit to Alderman Guzman is to find out how the taxation, I don't know that off the top of my head, how the taxation of taxi cabs and ride shares actually is implemented. I believe there is a state tax that you have to pay, but I can look and see how other communities especially home rule communities like ourselves, if they've been able to impose taxes. But you could still move forward with this, with a promise that I will get back to Alderman Guzman and the rest of the council on that specific issue.
Yeah, I was going to suggest we move it to council, and then we can amend it as needed at council.
So,
I'll
Alderman,
make that motion.
okay.
I'll
Can I have a
second.
second?
I'll second.
Okay. Roll call, please, Madam Clerk.
I need clarification. First, it was Donnerworth and Guzman going for elimination. That was on the floor. Now we have something else?
No,
we're still
it would be the elimination of the maximum taxi cab fares as set forth in section 2324.
So we're still dealing with Donnerworth and Guzman's, correct?
Yeah.
All right. Alderman Hayes.
Aye.
Bolton.
Aye.
Guzman.
Aye.
Martinez.
Aye.
Felix.
Aye.
Newsom.
Aye.
Turner.
Aye.
Donnerworth.
Aye.
Florian.
Aye.
Taylor.
Aye.
Motion passed.
Item E. Alderman Turner, do you want to start, or, okay.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. So this one is relates to the eye catcher signs, or signs that like flutter in the wind. You've seen them kind of sail-shaped signs, those in particular. But the ordinance or revisions as drafted include other eye catcher signs. We can look at those in detail, but these signs they're no more mesmerizing than any other sign. You know, you see orange signs, you see lights and whatever else, and we process that information in milliseconds. I don't see, and I've never heard of anyone getting mesmerized where they can't take their eyes off a sign because it's waving in the wind. And I would like to remove the sign catcher ordinance, or the ban on those signs, so that we can use them.
Does that include the right-of-way? Because, I mean, we're protecting the right-of-way.
Right. Well, no.
Right.
You still can't put any signs in the city property,
correct.
right? So
Okay.
this would be on private property. You know, you've seen them at various locations. Sometimes usually they're temporary. Sometimes you see people that leave them up forever, right? The other problem is a lack of consistency in enforcement. So you'll have a business in the 6th Ward that puts up a fluttering sign. Code compliance officer comes by and says, hey, you can't have that violation order. Say, okay, fine, thank you very much. Then the business owner is driving home and they go through another part of the city and they see these signs. They say, why are they picking on me? Well, they're not being picked on. It's just that one code compliance officer is enforcing that ordinance and another is not, right? Or at the time. So I think we eliminate confusion. It's not really a necessity and just another burden on businesses.
Commissioner Sellis, can you come up for a minute? So one of the things that I will say, when I ran for mayor, one of the #1 complaints that people had was eye-catching signs, because their description was, Waukegan already has a reputation, and then you come and you look at our city, and it's got all these eye-catching signs that look like garbage. The owners leave them in the streets. They don't pick them up. It just looks congested. And it was something that was very strong among residents. I know businesses love them because they're competing with each other. They want anything that will draw attention to their business. I do believe personally that it is a public safety hazard. I mean, I don't care what town you drive through, if you see them, and a lot of towns are eliminating them completely like we have. But Commissioner Sellis, would you like to?
So we know what we're talking about, and Commissioner Sellis can talk about this. If we can go to the 3rd slide on the presentation, it actually, we can put up what the definition is. Okay, that's one more slide back. There we go. Okay, so prohibited signs, eye-catcher signs are classified as prohibited signs in our sign ordinance, which is separate from our zoning ordinance. And then the next slide talks about what an eye-catcher sign is. And an eye-catcher sign shall mean a temporary sign or device which and there's a number of categories of them, which flutters or moves in the wind, which revolves, moves, or changes shape, or which reflects light in a startling or unusual way, or which emits light, changes color, or turns on and off. And then they give a number of examples, which include strings of flags, pennants, whirligigs, balloons or other inflatable items, other wind-driven devices, flashing lights, searchlights, novelty items, or similar devices without limitation to their being specifically included herein, and said type of sign is prohibited. So that's what our code currently says.
So good evening, council. I'm sorry I forgot to bring my guy who blows up and goes up and down like this for you so you can see what the signs mean. So we do have 9 code enforcement officers that go after the parkway signs. Those are the little signs that we buy houses, we clean gutters, we teach you how to drive a truck. We only have one inspector right now, the license and zoning officer, who goes out business to business and looks at every single sign. So if there isn't equal enforcement on that, it's not because all of code's not doing their job, it's just one person is trying to cover a whole city with this. And also, we do have kind of jagged edges for our city outline. So something that is legal here, next door might be unincorporated Lake County, and that is, it would be illegal over there or vice versa. So that's one of the issues that we've had. We've had complaints for that, and when the person tells us the address, it's either Gurnee or unincorporated Lake County. Most municipalities have the exact same ordinance that we do. I have done that research, and I believe I'd sent it to our legal counsel. We are the only ones who are enforcing it. Other municipalities have an ordinance where some of these signs are allowed as on a temporary basis if people pay permit fees. They don't enforce that ordinance. So you have signs that get, the feather flags like you were mentioning, Alderman Turner, the pennant flags or whatever, they get all torn up in the wind and they have them out in the street. I think that is a very bad look for the city. If we're looking to bring development in and clean up the city and do our curb appeal initiative that I had started with the direction of the mayor, I believe that would be something that would detrimentally, affect the city.
Thank you, Director Salas.
Alderman Florian?
And I just wanted to show what the proposed amendment would be. So if we can advance one slide. It basically keeps everything, it keeps the definition of eye catcher. It deletes the line that says said type of sign is prohibited. And then under prohibited signs, it removes eye catchers. So it's a pretty simple text amendment. Just for the impact of change on the next slide, it would allow the placement of eye catcher signs as temporary signs. They would still be subject to all the requirements for temporary signs, which would require a permit, payment of a $50 application fee. They cannot exceed the size limits in section 9.2, cannot be placed on public right-of-way or within a required yard. Maximum height, 5 feet for point-of-sale signs, 14 feet for construction signs, and then they could not be displayed more than 30 days in a row, 33 times a year. That's what's generally applicable for temporary signs.
I will add one thing. I'm sorry, I will call on both of you, I promise. Is some of you have asked, why do we not even have signs like our flags on the streets down here? Because the amount of wind that we get downtown shreds things, and the next thing you know, they're in the street. Like if you notice for the holidays, we put the snowflakes up. Those are a different thing than like the flags that would say, welcome to Waukegan or whatever, because they don't last. And the same thing happens with these eye catcher signs, is that they don't stay in the ground like they would even in other places because of the wind that we get here off of the lake. Alderman Florian.
I just want to say a couple things. First of all, I have a person I spoke to who lives in Lake Forest, works on the north side of Waukegan, has been driving through the city for a very long time, and commented on how much cleaner the city looks. So thank you to you and your staff for that.
Very much.
Another question I have is this, I'm assuming the answer is going to be yes, Noel, the sign ordinance is part of the UDO? Yes. Okay, thank you, Noel. She said yes, for the record. Okay, Alderman Turner, what problem are we trying to solve here? You said it would be a burden on businesses that they can't have these eye catcher signs? Is that what you're saying? You called it a burden. So I'm curious what burden they're currently.
An inability to advertise as they see fit. That's the burden. Remember, we're trying to be business friendly. So I've got a restaurant in the 6th Ward. They put up these signs that flutter in the wind, and they're over there next to their building, not in the parkway, not near the parkway. And we come by and say, oh, you can't have that sign because it flutters in the wind.
So one business asked for this.
I'm sorry, I spoke to that business, and I told them that they could put the sign on that monument sign that they have out by the street, advertising the same thing that they want those feather flags for. And that would be a permanent fix. It wouldn't be a temporary or an illegal sign.
Right, but that's not what they weren't complaining about, having a permanent sign up there. They know they can do that. Anybody can put it permanent, but, you know.
Right, well, that was the offer that I made when they called me. I said, instead of the feather flag, you could just put it permanently up on your monument, monument sign.
One quick
So
question.
I didn't finish. I have one more thing to
Right.
say based on what he said. So have they done any research to show that they get more customers when they have those flutter signs than when
they
they
get
don't?
it.
I've been in business 35 years. I've never used them once, and I'm busy all day long. So I'm curious if they know that these signs actually do something other than make our city look like crap.
In your opinion. So, aesthetics, right? What looks good to you might not to me, right? So they, again, private property owners, their property, their sign, they're paying a permit fee. Why can't they put Lynn, I got a flag flying in front of my house. So you tell me you drive down Jackson Street and oh my God, I'm gonna have an accident because there's a flag fluttering in the wind.
I didn't say anything about an accident. I said about how it looks.
Again, it's your opinion how things look, right? So these business owners, and it was that one restaurant, but there's also another business in my ward that came to me about it, right, a car wash, and other businesses throughout the city have mentioned it. Not a lot, not dozens, but several, right? And the point is, we are not Lake Forest. We are not a bedroom community. We're an industrial community. We are a blue-collar community. This is why we have all of these businesses that we do, right? We have tons of restaurants. We have a lot of car repair shops and factories and all kinds of things. This is not, mid-lane.
Alderman Hayes.
I'm saying you need a fluttering flag out there.
A few things. Thank you, Mayor. To say that they're not disruptive makes no sense. They're called eye catcher signs. They are designed to disrupt. They are designed to catch your eye. And if you're driving down a busy, Belvedere Road during rush hour, it could distract you. We don't know. But to say that they're not disruptive for that purpose, for traffic purposes, I think defies the very definition of what it is we're talking about. I also think, Alderman Turner, you can characterize the community however you want. We have a brand, and eye catcher signs cheapen our brand. Picture driving down Green Bay Road with every car dealership straining to garner the attention of people that are driving by, and they all have these, I'm going to call it obnoxious signs dancing in the wind or glowing or flashing or whatever it is. They are designed not to look good. They are designed to get your attention and get you to come into their dealership or go pull their slots or go buy beer at their store. It is not designed. They are not thinking of the community as a whole. Right. They are not thinking of the community as a whole. They are thinking of ways to maximize their profits. If I could just finish, we need to be thinking of the community as a whole. And I think it would be very difficult for somebody to argue that the eye catcher signs actually look good, that they enhance the community, the look of the community, and the brand that we are working so hard to improve and to refine and use whatever words you want. But I don't think that eye catcher signs do anybody any good other than the specific business that wants to put them there.
Can I say something too, Hayes, before you?
Just one last point I just want to make is I think, prohibiting those was a huge step forward, and this is a prime example of us taking one big step back to help a few businesses that like I said, are trying to maximize their profits, and some of their owners may not even live in the community. So let's think about the residents. Let's think about the people that walk down those sidewalks. Let's think about the people that drive on those streets and that call this place home. I don't think it helps us at all.
If I may, I don't think that the problem is that we want to leave these as a permanent sign. I think that some people have events and you want to put them out there. The banning of that situation where you're having a weekend sale, I don't think that's a bad thing. Where it's kind of rare that we're having a huge sale, they put up the thingies that move around and whatnot. I don't think that's a bad thing. Now, if you leave them permanent, yes, that is a bad thing. So, and like Stu said in the beginning, we're allowed to make changes here. So if you guys are wanting to maybe change a little bit something, I think that's okay. I think that on there it says it's a temporary. Maybe it'd be more. Maybe we could talk about this more, but make it more specific. Because sometimes you do want to advertise, but obviously you don't want to make it like you have these little cheap things as permanent. Signs. We don't want that, of course. We do want to keep our brand as Waukegan. But if someone wants to use those kind of signs for an event, I don't think that's a bad thing. And I don't think a $50 fee is I don't think it should be that high also. Maybe making some changes would be better instead of just saying it's banned altogether. Because some people do utilize these signs for their sales or whatnot. But I think that when they're going to put them on there, I think we should be specific as to, hey, you need to get your permit. Otherwise, you will get fined.
I'm going to throw out two things. One is if you have business after business after business doing it all at once, how does one business stand out over the other? It's the same competition as what you would have with everything else. Second of all, are we going to allow cannabis centers to have flags? Yes? Okay.
Why are we micromanaging how people advertise? You just like you can't do this.
If I can just say,
next thing you'll be like,
I'm sorry, if I can
we don't
just say
like
one
the
thing.
color red because people see red and they think different things. It's just crazy.
Alderman Martinez?
Yeah, let's consider the new businesses that come to our town who invest they invest their businesses here, and the first 6 months is either going to make or break a business, from what I'm told. So I think in this situation, I think it's beneficial because you want to draw attention. You want to make sure that the people see, hey, this is a new business. In that aspect, yes, I think that we should consider it. I think we should do a better job monitoring it, yes, and make sure that we put our foot down and say, hey, you know what? We can amend it somehow, but somehow or another, I just don't want to take that away because businesses are walking on eggshells. We've seen a lot of businesses that fail here in Waukegan, so they're going to try and attempt anything they can to try to draw you in. For example, the sushi shop we're in my ward, on Macquarie and Grand, that is flourishing, and those signs, and people are attracted to those signs. So if it's used responsibly, in this case, when there's new businesses, because we want that business to profit, we want them to stay in Waukegan, and that's just another way of inviting up customers to come to solicit their business. So,
Alderman Guzman?
So I could go either way as long as they're temporary, not a permanent thing. But I want to make sure that those signs that are not included, the ones that says we buy houses and so on and so forth, those will not be included in this.
Well, no, wait a minute. So now you're impeding on their freedom of speech. If a guy buys houses, why can't he put that sign on his property? I understand, and I take them out of my ward. So if you're putting them in the city property, which this ordinance does not allow anyway. Those houses signs, they should not be in City Parkway.
Those signs aren't at people's one home. They're all over.
Yeah, what if they're all over somebody's on private property? That's my point. Right. Don't conflate this with putting signs on public property. That's not what we're talking about.
And I can clarify, yes, we do not allow any sort of commercial promotion or any sort of sign on public rights of way that we own. And then also off-premises signs are regulated, so you couldn't put that business sign on somebody else's property unless it was like a billboard. But
okay, then I'm good with that.
Wait a minute, and real quick, how do we handle, and maybe it's not for discussion, but for thought and later discussion, how do we handle yard sale, garage sale signs, because people put those in the parkway, they put them on poles and everything only on the weekend. So just something to think about for later discussion.
Alderman Hayes has the floor.
Oh, thank you. So the last thing I want to say is I don't want anyone to mistake the fact that a business, a new restaurant, for example, can still put up a sign. They can still put up a grand opening sign maybe on their awning or on their storefront. You see car dealerships that will pop the hoods of some big trucks and put sale, you know, the big, each individual letter on a different car. There's still many mechanisms by which they can advertise a sale or a grand opening. But what we're trying to do is avoid these obnoxious wind-blowing or glow-in-the-dark signs that just end up being a distraction, not only to the people that are driving, and a nuisance, and they're obnoxious, and they're ugly, and like I said, it cheapens the brand, but think about the adjacent businesses that don't have those, that are maybe completely unrelated to it. Maybe there's a drugstore and a smoothie shop or something like that. And the last thing that one of those businesses wants is to have to look out its window or have its customers deal with those signs. There's a reason that we prohibited this. I don't know when we did it. I agree with it being prohibited, but we're not trying to infringe on anybody's ability to advertise. We're just trying to make it so that the city looks and has a different feel to it and does not you know, it just looks better to everyone who has to drive down these roads and everybody who has to park in these parking lots. And like I said, I think it really kind of comes down to what it is we stand for and what it is we're willing to put up with. And I don't think cheapening our brand is the best option for the city
People
council.
that like those signs, they like looking at those. The kids love seeing the Wiggly Man, and other people like seeing the waves and stuff. People, so you know, again, Tom, we're not here to micromanage people's lives and businesses. I mean, this is, and really, if you think about it, it's a freedom of speech and expression issue. It's a First Amendment issue to tell people you can't put that kind of sign up because you don't like the way it looks. That's ridiculous.
Okay. I'm going to make a statement first. I remember Alderman Newsom bringing this up one time about how we had all these liquor signs and the amount of how much you could get beers for, and then that turned into gaming ones. It's just spread to the point that these are not new businesses. They are distractions in a lot of ways. Commissioner Sellis, how, if we made this temporary, how feasible would it be to enforce? It would be difficult, I imagine, right?
It would put our one person who would be enforcing this at, you know, he'd have to be checking his computer every single day to see which one is expiring, which one's not expiring, and all that. Businesses are allowed to put up banners, and again, it falls under this temporary sign permit. And even that, sometimes we fall behind. They come and they get their permit like they're supposed to, but then we don't catch it until 6 months later when they're, you know, after they should have been taken down after 30 days. So it makes it a little more difficult. And we're not impeding anybody's freedom of speech. Putting up sale is not freedom of speech. If you want to put a sign that says you like a certain political figure on your property, that's freedom of speech, and we don't regulate that. We just regulate the signs that are in the public right away.
Alderman Florian?
He's trying to say that by not allowing these, we're keeping people from advertising their business and that we're micromanaging. But don't we already have a sign? Like, you can't just put up whatever sign you want when you open a business. There's rules about how high it can be, how big it can be, how...
People apply for permits. The casino did it. The Master Sushi did it. Everybody's done the...
We had to give the casino variance to put the lights on the building, I think I remember.
Correct, yes.
Even though that didn't really go anywhere else but on the building, that was a variance that they had to ask for. So we already regulate signage in many ways. This is not like all of a sudden we started doing flutter signs were a problem, correct?
No.
And the businesses know that when they open their business. They know that you can't have these types of signs. So we're not infringing on anybody's ability or suddenly pulling the rug out from under them.
In all due respect, I don't think this is a freedom of speech. I mean, I know you thought signing a civility clause was a violation of your freedom of speech. You can still say what you want to say, but you say it civilly. That's not a violation of freedom of speech.
Say it the way you want me to say it, that's freedom. That's not freedom of speech.
But I think it's more about what works in our city. I mean, I want to know honestly, what are the chances of enforcing this? Because if we can't really do that, and it would take another employee to implement that, that's a big cost to us.
If we just remove it altogether, we'd be okay. Wouldn't have to enforce it.
Anyway, is there a motion to keep it like this?
I'll make a motion to keep it as is.
You want to vote on it like this? Okay,
No, I want to keep the prohibition in place.
okay.
I'll second.
Hold on, you have a proposal, though. You have a proposal that was put forward to change this, and so that's the proposal that's before you. If you want to amend that, you can make a motion to amend that. But the proposal that was that's on the agenda would be to remove the prohibition and basically classify eye-catcher signs as permitted temporary signs, subject to the requirements as temporary signs.
That's the motion that I would make.
Okay.
I'll second it.
Second, yeah.
Okay, so you've got
Hold on,
Turner and Guzman.
I believe, so Hayes and Florian, are you standing down?
No, but apparently I can't make that motion.
Well,
You can amend.
You can make a motion to amend the motion that was just made.
So to keep it the same. So you would amend it to keep it the same. Right?
Yes.
You would amend it to remove to keep the signs prohibited.
I mean, the point is, if that the motion, the motion of the sponsor of this amendment, if that fails, then this stays the same.
We can vote on it either
and
way.
The reason I'm making this, and I realize that we did this in previous ones, in the previous ones, there was a consensus to leave things as it was, and I think everything here has been voted on unanimously so far. It appears you have a split vote, and I think for clarity's sake, it would make the most sense to vote up or down on the proposal as it is, and then, then it goes or it dies here.
Corporate counsel, can we table this for a while, or, I mean, I need,
Well, okay, so there's a motion, and what was it? Remind me who the second was.
I wanted to see if we can table it. I need to do some more research on this.
Yeah, we can put it.
It's still going to go to the full city council till January. So if you vote on it now, you still have 3-4 weeks to look into it, and then at that point, then we can either move forward or not move forward. So this is just a preliminary vote, just to move it on to the next process. So if it moves forward, you still have 3-4 weeks to do your research.
Alderman Guzman is absolutely correct. From a procedural standpoint, you have a motion and a second that you could vote to postpone, basically hold this over. Now, we haven't been using the holdover rule in committee. There's nothing that says that you can't, but I think, this is something where we're trying to have an open discussion and move things forward or let them die. So if you would like to make a motion to postpone this to a future committee of the whole, that motion would be voted on. And if a majority voted to have it considered at a future committee of the whole, we would schedule a date for that. If that motion fails, then we go back to the motion that was made by Alderman Turner and seconded by Alderman Guzman, I think, or Felix, which would then bring this to the council at the first meeting in January.
I'll motion.
Okay, so you're making the motion to postpone?
Postpone, yes.
To a committee of the whole to be scheduled?
Absolutely.
Okay, so we have a motion to postpone. Is there a second to?
I'll second it.
Okay. So that would require a roll call, and this would postpone further discussion of this until a future committee of the whole, which we will probably be scheduling later tonight. So a roll call would be appropriate on the motion to postpone.
We all ready?
Yep.
Alderman Hayes.
Aye.
Alderman Bolton.
Aye.
Guzman.
No.
Martinez.
Aye.
Felix.
Nay.
Newsome.
Aye.
Turner.
Aye.
Donnerworth.
Aye.
Florian.
Aye.
Yeas have.
This topic
Forgot
will
me.
be,
Aye.
yeah, oh, sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry.
This topic will be postponed for further consideration at the next committee of the whole, which we will schedule before we adjourn tonight.
Next. F. Next one.
Item F. Alderman Florian, you want to talk about item F?
Thank you, Mayor. I am proposing that we add to the city code, because we don't have anything like this, that we ban or tax the distribution of single-use plastic bags by retailers or restaurants, prohibit the distribution of styrofoam-type containers, cups, and plates, and bowls by restaurants and food stores, prohibit the sale of Mylar balloons, and prohibit the release of helium balloons. All of these are environmentally related. Stu asked me if I wanted these separate or together. I figured we might as well just bunch them together because it's all about our environment. We've talked about our environment up here ad nauseum, and a lot of, I'll just say, forward-thinking communities are going in this direction. I don't expect this to happen overnight, obviously. I think this is going to be more of an education process at first to get people to start thinking about using recyclable material instead of plastic and styrofoam. And balloon releases are just horrible for the environment. There's so many things that go wrong when you release a balloon. It does not go to heaven. I hate to tell those of you that believe in that, but it comes back down to earth at some point and does some kind of damage to an animal, to the lake, to something. And I think we have a community that's been, I wish I could say shit on. Well, oh, I did say it, didn't I? For so long that we're just used to it. And we need to start doing something more forward-thinking for our community, for the children in the community, for our future. I've said it before, I know that a lot of people are going to be moving to this area because of our water, and we have to do everything we can to protect that water. So anyway, that's it.
I got a question for Alderman Florent. Okay, so with the whole restaurant thing, you said something about taxing. So that means most people, when you go put an order into a restaurant and to go, they usually use these kind of containers. I mean, they could go and use something else, but now it's usually a free service that is done, that is included in your price. So if you remove this and you start taxing, that means food is going to go higher, even higher.
So
again,
the
because,
tax is just for the bags, not for the containers.
but you still have to push the price even higher. So right now, with inflation, you've seen restaurants' prices almost double in the last couple of years. So now instead of giving a free takeout when you order something, it's free. Now you're going to have to pay extra for that takeout order.
Yes, sir. Also,
a tax.
if you prohibit the single use, the little plastic bags we take our grocery home in, that's really not going to have a big impact because so much of our foodstuffs and other products come packaged in plastic, right? So you go to the grocery store, you get a piece of cheese that's in plastic, you get a loaf of bread that's in plastic, you get a gallon of milk that's in plastic. All these items that you buy are in plastic, and you put them in a plastic bag and take them home. So maybe you force people to use a cloth bag that's reusable, but you're still bringing in all these plastic product packaging. So something to think about.
Well, I know Aldi, I don't do the grocery shopping anymore, my husband does it. Aldi's been doing this forever. You can't get a plastic bag in Aldi. If you want a bag in Aldi, you get a recycled bag, and you either bring your own or you pay for a recycled bag. And we have an Aldi that's been very successful in town. Their prices are lower than everybody else's, actually, I believe, which is one of the reasons my husband shops there.
Well, I have a question, but how do you tell a senior citizen who's on a tight budget that you have to pay for your bags when it's It'll already be.
They can bring their own. They can bring their own from home.
Now,
You know, I think, Mayor, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
No,
Alderman Hayes.
To Alderman Florian's earlier point, I think whatever we do with this tonight, I think it's a really important discussion that we have, or at least continue, depending on what we do. I think that there's some really good points in here, and we might not agree on all of them, but maybe some of them. I know styrofoam, for example, might be something that we could all potentially get on board with, while perhaps not taxing single-use plastic bags. I also think that it might be helpful to have people from the community, for example, someone who's in favor of a balloon release, come explain why that might be the case, or what the burden might be to have someone pay 7 cents for a plastic bag. I'm not in favor of raising prices, food prices, whatever they may be, or imposing additional taxes, but I think it's a broader conversation, and it was really important to start the conversation. So I'm not sure, I guess we probably have to vote on this tonight, but I would just encourage everyone to perhaps maybe have this on an agenda, at least at a community, or excuse me, at a committee level, or start to ask your constituents about it and see what they think, or have it even come up at city council just so that it can be discussed and see what kind of turnout we get. Sometimes I'm surprised by the things that people come up for, and I'd be really interested to hear what business owners and restaurant owners and residents think of this proposal.
If I'm not mistaken, isn't the law changing with styrofoam? You want to address that?
So the state has considered, there's been a number of legislative proposals to ban the use of single-use styrofoam containers, whether they be for like takeout containers, cups, bowls, and right now the last bill to ban it statewide failed, but the state is now prohibiting the use for any use by the state itself or any of its contractors. I can just run through these slides really quickly and kind of talk about what some other communities have done and the trouble that they've run into and what exceptions they've created. And it may be useful for you guys to go through each one and talk about whether you think it's worthwhile continuing a conversation on any one of these, because they don't all have to, it's not an all or nothing thing, I guess. If we can go to the single-use plastic bag regulations. So many communities have actually considered a full-on prohibition of any single-use plastic bags. City of Chicago had that, and they backed off of it. There's a lot of reasons why it's impractical to completely ban them. And so what some communities in the area, Chicago, Evanston, Oak Park, and Northbrook have done is that they impose a fee per bag between 7 cents and 10 cents. If you bring your own bag, even if you bring a bunch of like plastic bags stuffed into your purse or whatever from home, you don't get charged. You can use your own plastic bags as much as you want. And then there's important exceptions, because there are certain times when a plastic bag, when a paper bag or a reusable cloth bag just would not be sanitary or right. When you have prescription drugs, when your bag sold for initial use for yard waste, pest waste, garbage, dry cleaning, or newspapers, you're not going to get a paper dog waste bag. That's just not going to work. And then farmers markets are often carved out. If there is a perishable grocery item like a head of lettuce that needs to retain water. And then some communities actually allow plastic bags for like carry out of like a doggy bag. Not every single ordinance has all these exceptions, but some do. The next prohibition that Alderman Florian had talked about was the use of polystyrene and styrofoam. As the mayor pointed out, there's a number of bills that may be banning this statewide pretty soon. And a number of coastal communities on the east and west coast have started to ban these. It includes takeout containers, cups, bowls, and plates. Los Angeles has imposed a phase ban starting in April of 2023 and that will expand to everyone in April 2024. There are exceptions. Styrofoam insulated coolers are allowed. Craft supplies, if you're making a little, like putting googly eyes on little styrofoam peanuts, that's okay. Packaging for drugs and materials, if you have like ampules for diabetes, those obviously need to be insulated. Safety devices like car seats, obviously we're not going to ban those. Pre-approved building materials, there's actually a lot of sustainable building materials that are now used that have a styrofoam core. And then to Alderman Turner's point, products that are packages outside the city. There are a lot of things that may come in that are not created in the city that are sold that, you know, we would get into trouble with the U.S. Constitution's Commerce Clause if we were preventing things coming in that were packaged elsewhere. The next two.
Can I just make a comment on one
yeah.
of the things when we talked? You don't necessarily have to raise like a fee of 7 to 10 cents for a plastic bag. In some communities, they will allow you, they don't per se charge you, but they give you a discount if you bring your bags. And I think in a community like ours, rather than charging, that might be a better way to go, where you actually give them, you know, that 7 to 10 cents back if they bring their own bags.
Pay that, the owners of the business? I mean, they'll.
They take it off of your receipt at the time when you're paying.
I think that's a wonderful idea.
We just voted to repeal the taxi cab ordinance because it's, you know, commerce between two parties, and we're interjecting ourselves in the business thing. And I see the value in as protection of the environment. I'm absolutely in favor of this balloon releases and even the Mylar balloons, I guess. But telling people that they can't sell or give away a plastic bag when so much, one plastic bag will hold 10 or 15 other items that are in plastic, so you're really not having a net positive effect. It's not really accomplishing anything to do that, to ban these.
But if you're not
plastic bags.
charging them for it, but giving them a discount for it, I'm not sure that that's, I don't think that's hurting them. I think that's a plus that you can offer as a discount.
I got something to say about that. Okay, so when you buy styrofoam and you use it to give out your product inside there, a styrofoam will cost you between 1 and maybe 4 cents a piece, depending on the type of styrofoam. If you're going now to give 7 to 10 cents back, now you're losing. Now why not go to cardboard or some kind of other material? And that's the whole thing. It comes down to cost. The reason why people go to styrofoam is for the cost, between 1 and 4 cents per styrofoam container. So the whole to pack up your whole order might be 20 to 30 cents, and that's how come the owner says, well, we'll just add it on to the cost of the food instead of passing on to the customer. But if you go higher, that means you're going to have to be charged a takeout fee. It's no longer free. But I do understand styrofoam. I don't like it. It goes into the beaches. It harms birds, and I mean, it's a whole big thing. And then it takes like so many years to dissolve. It's a big thing.
Alderman.
And I agree with a lot of, because while I was reading this proposal, I agree with a lot of it, like the balloons and so on and so forth, but the charges, it's just, maybe we should just all styrofoam like the state's going to do, but it's up to the state.
Did you want to propose like to talk about it more with the community?
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. However, I have a couple questions. I feel strongly about all of it. Styrofoam seems like it might be one of the easier ones to implement, but I want to ask about that process, and I am concerned about what that implementation looks like for the businesses that have bought, for example, styrofoam in bulk and now may not be able to use it. So is there a grace period, and how we phase that in would be one of my questions. But I do think it might make sense to maybe pull a couple of these out and maybe advance them, or wait perhaps 2 meetings and have people come in and talk to us about it. But I think it might make sense to at least push some of this forward.
Like the releasing of the balloons, I think we could all probably agree on that, right?
Yeah, balloons and styrofoam sounds like that's something that we might
I don't
be
know
able
about the
to.
styrofoam, but the release of
It
the
is something with the balloons that is a cultural thing that is going to take some education on our part.
Thank you.
To let the public know, because it is, I mean, we've been at balloon releases that we didn't even know we were going to be at, and it is something, but I will tell you, it has taken out generators before in our community, and the amount that you see at our beach of balloons that have just like on a string that have deflated, that now our animals, like wildlife can get into. So I think it's something that needs to be considered, but it will take an effort by all of us and a commitment to educate our community, because it is such a cultural thing that people do. So.
Well, can I make a motion then to advance the balloon releases and the Mylar balloons together?
Is everybody okay with that?
And styrofoam?
to ban the Mylar balloons?
Yes.
I don't know about that.
The sale.
Because there's so many businesses that have those, that use those.
I don't think you should ban the sale of them. People might have them and
For
buy 'em
birthday
for
parties,
birthdays and
yeah.
things like that, and they're
Yeah.
not releasing them into the air. I don't think you, or any type of balloon, you would ban the sale of it. But if,
That's a different story.
yeah.
If I have a question. Now, if we decide to ban it, how are we going to monitor that anyway? How are we going to have somebody out there? Oh,
Thank you, yeah, I
we're
was
going
like,
to
how
watch
do you
you
monitor
put balloons
that?
up. How are we going to
Well,
monitor that?
like the mayor said, it's going to be about educating the community. There was just a thing on Facebook, I don't know if anyone else saw it. There was a balloon release at one of the churches, I forget which one. And some woman wrote on there, oh, balloon releases are terrible for the community. I wish you wouldn't do this. And the pastor of the church actually reached out to her and asked her what the problem was, and she explained it, and he said, we're not going to do them anymore. So that's what needs to happen.
Talking about two different things, though, because they're talking about banning the sale of them.
I know, but he's saying how we're going to enforce the balloon releases.
I think we can all agree that we want to ban the release of them, maybe not the ban of the sale of them, because
Okay, well, let me rephrase it then. I make a motion that we make an ordinance creating a ban on balloon releases.
But then, like the mayor said, it's just a cultural thing. How are you going to explain it to someone that they just lost a loved one and they're down and out, and you're telling them, no, now you can't even. It's against our city ordinance to release balloons. So it is a cultural.
Then you
thing.
explain to them why we voted for this, because it
That
kills
helps.
animals and it's horrible for the environment. And the balloon does not go to heaven.
I understand that. You keep emphasizing that. But what I'm saying is that, I mean, maybe we need to educate our citizens out there and let them know what the options are. Maybe we need to even put it on a ballot. Let them decide. Put it back on them. So,
Is there a
but
second?
I just don't think, totally just banning the balloon release.
Do I have a second?
Can I say this, please?
Wants to speak, she's next.
I can understand wanting to release, to ban the release. And eventually you can, just like I saw in this ordinance that they did, they took a year to do that. You educate the community and let them know that, okay, as of such and such a date on down the road, you cannot do this anymore in the city of Waukegan because of XYZ, instead of doing cold turkey. And then.
I agree. I mean, I think they need to.
And with the sale, I don't think that, I might want to go buy some balloons for my grandkids. And you going to tell me I can't buy them in Waukegan? Come on, I want Waukegan to have the money instead of going to Gurney or someplace else to buy them. So I can't see banning them, but if you want to ban the release.
Second.
Is there a second?
There was a second, right?
I seconded.
Felix?
So what was the motion exactly, just so? The ban on the balloon releases, right? Okay.
No, just the ban on balloons.
What happened to the styrofoam?
We're going to address that separately.
Well, I
Why?
mean, you could do multiple different motions to deal with different parts
Right,
in
but I'm
different
afraid
ways.
I'm going to lose people on the styrofoam, and then the balloons won't pass.
No, I understand that. So what you're saying is you're making a motion right now specifically on one part of this, which would be to move forward with a ban on balloon releases, and possibly integrating some of the comments that were discussed about giving a delayed enforcement time. And then the sale of the Mylar balloons, just to emphasize what other communities have done, specifically the Mylar balloons are those metallic balloons that when filled with helium, they don't have to be filled with helium. You can fill one with air, and it won't fly up. Specifically when Mylar balloons connect with power lines, they create an arc. That arc shorts out and can take out a transformer or other grid equipment. So you see in places like California, which are very subject to wildfires, they've done a full ban on those for that specific reason. They still allow them, but you can't put helium in them. That's one solution that some communities have had, and if you'd like us to explore maybe putting some conditions or exceptions on that, we can do that. But otherwise, it seems like there's unanimity, at least on the balloon release. So, do we want to clarify what the motion is then?
The motion is to create an ordinance that bans the release of balloons in the city of Waukegan. And we can clarify, as Alderman Newsom said, when we speak about it at council, whether it's 6 months down the road or 12 months down the road, but we'll give the community some time. Hopefully, Mr. Saden back there is going to write about this, and that'll get some people's attention. Most of you guys are on Facebook. Put it on your Facebook page. Talk about it at your church. That's how we're going to get the word out. We're not going to put Granny in jail for doing this, but we want our community to understand why we don't want balloons released in the city of Waukegan.
Have a motion. Did we get a second on that?
Second.
Alderman Felix.
Okay. Roll call, please, Madam Clerk.
Alderman Hayes.
Aye.
Bolton.
Aye.
Guzman.
Aye.
Martinez.
Aye.
Felix.
Aye.
Newsom.
Aye.
Turner.
Aye.
Donnerworth.
Aye.
Florian.
Aye.
Mayor Taylor.
Aye.
Motion passed.
Okay, we now only have 10 minutes or 7 minutes left. Can we go ahead and, how about this, since there's only 3 left, can, Chief of Staff, how is next week looking? Can we at least get, there's 1 for discussion and 2 to be voted on. Can we have a committee of the whole, or are we already booked on the agenda for next week?
Next week you have a special community development, public works and finance, and all 3 are light. Actually, community development only has 1 item and it's a lease. So you do have space, Mayor.
Okay, can we go ahead and, is that agreeable to everybody rather than calling special meetings?
Yep, I agree. Let's get it.
One of the reasons, to be fair, that I don't want to keep booking these special meetings is my staff is exhausted. Frankly, they get flex time for this. They can't be doing everything. They have to take time off to make up this time. So I want to get as much done in council as we can possibly get done. So if that's okay with you, we'll at least get the 2 items. The discussion we can do at the following one, if that's okay.
Well, and
Okay.
Mayor,
Yep,
since
I
we have a few minutes, do you want to, do we have to roll call that, or are we?
Yeah, well,
Well, I wanted to ask, maybe we, like you said, maybe we can start doing maybe a committee of the whole before a meeting, maybe once a month, or maybe that's probably something more feasible.
yeah, we just can't have 10 million things on it, though. You can do, like, especially if they're discussion, you can do 1 to 2, but otherwise you're going to go into council time, which the audience gets really annoyed when we don't start at 7 o'clock
Yep.
because our committee meetings are running so late. So I will commit to putting on as many as we can, but 1, our attorneys are overloaded right now.
And
We are going
expensive.
into budget season, so letting us handle 1 or 2 things at a time is far more reasonable than having a bunch of them. So, and especially if they're things that UDO is going to be resolving anyway. But for now, let's get these on Monday's agenda, if that's reasonable. Alderman Hayes?
Just a quick comment. If we're not going to advance the potential ban on styrofoam, at least anytime soon, I would maybe ask everyone to think about, or I would ask the city, maybe we don't have styrofoam cups up here, and we start with ourselves as an example, and we take it from there and see how that goes. So we can all do our part, as little as it may be.
Good job, Tom. Thank you.
So, Mayor, I got one more thing. How many more do we have after this? Because you said there's still some other stuff pending?
There's these three right now. The two of them are voting on, and one is discussion.
No, I'm not talking about, how about after this? After these three are done?
I don't know that there's any more, but they would
There
not
should be at least one more.
If I missed one, I mean, what is it? The secret.
I think the initials were CEMT, the one with, for the ambulances and stuff like that, that Alderman Newsom sent to Committee of the Whole from Financing and
The
Purchasing.
GEMT? Did we send that to
GEMT.
Committee of the Whole? I thought we approved that.
We approved the first 300,000 for the fire equipment.
Oh, yes.
Okay. Before we put that on there, I'd like you to talk to Don, because that would affect next year's budget tremendously, and all future budgets, because that takes money out of the general fund. So if you could talk to him first before we ever consider putting that on, please do that this week, and then we'll talk to Stu.
Or it can be part of the budget discussion as well.
Yeah, it can be part of the budget discussion.
Which is when,
Okay.
yeah. Okay.
Well,
Okay, can I have
Motion
a
to
motion
adjourn.
to adjourn?
Motion to
First,
adjourn.
a second.
second.
Who are
Second,
they?
Ms.
Hey, Ron
Boozman.
Gardella. Ron Gardella.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you, everyone.
Aye.
I'd like a Tiffany glass.